In this video, I'll be explaining the entire timeline of Warhammer 40,000 in chronological order, covering every major era from the ancient cosmic conflicts that predated humanity by millions of years all the way through to the current ongoing events in the 42nd millennium. This timeline encompasses 10 major chronological periods, including the War in Heaven, the Age of Strife, the Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, and the recent Indomitus Crusade, focusing on the primary in-universe chronology, and does not delve into meta-narratives or real-world publication history, which means we're looking strictly at the events as they occurred within the setting itself, rather than discussing when Games Workshop released specific codexes, novels, or editions. As always, throughout the video, there will be a timeline animation at the bottom of the screen, so you can easily follow along and understand exactly when each event takes place, which is especially important for Warhammer 40k given that its timeline spans literally billions of years, and uses a unique dating system that can be confusing for newcomers. Did you know? The Warhammer 40,000 universe's origins stretch back billions of years before humanity even existed, with cosmic wars that shape the very fabric of reality. Wars so devastating that they created the warp as we know it today and set in motion events that would define the galaxy for eons to come. But before we get to any of that, we need to explain the setting first, because Warhammer 40k is not just a timeline of events, but a universe with its own rules, factions, and fundamental concepts that you need to understand before the chronological events will make any sense. Our story begins not millions, but tens of millions of years before the present day of the 41st millennium. We must travel back approximately 60 million years before the birth of Christ, to an era so ancient that the very stars themselves were arranged differently in the heavens. This is the age of the Old Ones, and the beginning of the War in Heaven, a conflict so devastating that its echoes still reverberate through the galaxy today. The Old Ones were among the first sentient beings to emerge in the Milky Way galaxy. They were amphibian in nature, cold-blooded creatures of immense size and even greater intellect. But what truly set them apart was their mastery of the warp, that parallel dimension of psychic energy and raw motion that exists alongside our material universe. The Old Ones understood the warp in ways that no species since has truly replicated. They could manipulate it, shape it, bend reality itself to their will through psychic power. They were, in every sense of the word, gods among mortals, though they would have rejected such a title. These ancient beings did not hoard their gift of life. Instead, they became gardeners on a galactic scale, seeding worlds across the stars with the building blocks of existence. Wherever they traveled, life followed. They cultivated ecosystems, nurtured primitive organisms, and guided evolution along paths that would eventually lead to sentience. Their motivations for this great work remain unclear. Perhaps it was simple curiosity, the desire to see what forms life might take. Perhaps it was loneliness, the need for companionship in a cold and empty universe. Or perhaps they foresaw a time when the galaxy would need defenders, and they were preparing an army. Whatever their reasons, the Old Ones shaped the biological destiny of countless worlds. Their empire, if such a word can adequately describe it, stretched across the galaxy. It was not an empire of conquest or domination, but one of knowledge and exploration. The Old Ones built wonders that would make even the greatest achievements of later races seem like children's toys. Chief among these was the Webway, an intricate network of tunnels that existed outside of normal space-time. The Webway was neither fully in the material universe nor fully in the warp, but rather occupied a carefully constructed pocket dimension between the two. Through it, the Old Ones could travel instantaneously from one side of the galaxy to the other without the dangers of warp travel. It was a highway system on a cosmic scale, connecting their worlds and allowing their civilization to flourish across unimaginable distances. The technology required to create and maintain such a structure was so advanced that even the most brilliant minds of the 41st millennium can barely comprehend it, let alone replicate it. But the Old Ones were not alone in the galaxy. On a world orbiting a dying, radiation-soaked star, another species had emerged. The Necrons, as they called themselves, were a people born into suffering. Their sun bombarded their planet with deadly radiation, ensuring that every single member of their race was plagued by cancer and cellular degradation from birth. A Necron who lived to see 40 years was considered blessed by their standards. Most died much younger, their bodies ravaged by tumors and radiation sickness. Their entire culture was built around death. They were obsessed with it, feared it, and yet paradoxically celebrated it. They built vast necropolis cities, monuments to the dead that dwarfed the living quarters of their civilization. Despite their short lives, or perhaps because of them, the Necrons achieved remarkable things. They became masters of technology, driven by the desperate need to accomplish something, anything, before their brief candle was snuffed out. They developed faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, and sophisticated artificial intelligence. They reached out into the stars, establishing colonies on other worlds, always seeking to escape the deadly radiation of their home sun. But no matter how far they traveled, they could not escape what was written into their very genes. The damage was hereditary, passed down through countless generations. They were a race living under a death sentence, and they knew it. When the Necrons encountered the Old Ones, they saw beings who had everything they lacked. The Old Ones were effectively immortal, living for millions of years if they chose to. They were not plagued by disease or the frailty of flesh. The Necrons ambassadors returned to their people with tales of these ancient beings, and those tales sparked something dark in the Necrons soul: envy. Bitter, consuming envy. They approached the Old Ones, begging for aid, for the secret to their longevity. Surely beings of such power and wisdom could cure the Necrontyr of their affliction. Surely they could share the gift of life with a race that had never truly known it. But the Old Ones refused. The reasons for this refusal have been debated by scholars for millions of years. Some believe the Old Ones saw something dark in the Necrontyr spirit, a capacity for cruelty born from their suffering that made them too dangerous to uplift. Others suggest that the Old Ones simply could not help, that their immortality was so fundamental to their biology and their connection to the warp that it could not be transferred to another species. Still, others whisper that it was simple arrogance, the unwillingness of the powerful to share their gifts with those they deemed lesser. Whatever the true reason, the result was the same. The Necrontyr were denied, and that denial festered into hatred. The Necrontyr civilization fractured into warring dynasties, each led by powerful nobles who commanded vast territories and armies. They turned their weapons on each other, fighting bitter civil wars that accomplished nothing but adding to their already staggering death toll. It was the Silent King, Jarek, the greatest of the Necrontyr rulers, who finally united the dynasties. He did so by giving them a common enemy. He declared war on the Old Ones themselves. It was a war the Necrontyr could not hope to win. The Old Ones' mastery of the warp gave them abilities that seemed like magic to the Necrontyr. Entire Necrontyr fleets were destroyed with a thought. Worlds were reshaped or rendered uninhabitable. The Necrontyr threw themselves at the Old Ones with the fury of the dying, and they were crushed for their efforts. Defeated and humiliated, the Necrontyr retreated to lick their wounds. It was then, in their darkest hour, that they encountered something new, something ancient and terrible. On the edges of their empire, Necrontyr scientists detected unusual energy signatures emanating from the hearts of stars. These were not natural phenomena, but entities, vast intelligences of living energy that fed on the nuclear fusion at the cores of suns. The Necrontyr called them the Ceton, the star gods, and they were drawn to the Necrontyr like moths to a flame. But it was not the Necrontyr's technology or their civilization that attracted the Cetan. It was their suffering. The Cetan fed on energy, yes, but they could also feed on life force itself, and the Necrontyr, dying by the billions, represented a feast beyond imagining. The first Cetan to make contact was known as Azagorod, the Nightbringer, a being of such terrifying power that its very presence caused stars to dim. But it was another Cetan, Mephetron the Deceiver, who would seal the Necrontyr's fate. The Deceiver was the most cunning of the star gods, a being that understood manipulation and lies in ways that even the cleverest mortal could not comprehend. It approached the Silent King with an offer. The Cetan, it claimed, could give the Necrontyr what the Old Ones had denied them: eternal life, bodies that would never age, never sicken, never die. All they had to do was trust the Cetan and undergo a process called biotransference. The Silent King, desperate to save his people and defeat the Old Ones, agreed. It was the greatest mistake in galactic history. The Cetan had the Necrontyr construct vast machines, furnaces of transformation powered by captured stars. The Necrontyr were told that these machines would transfer their consciousness into bodies of living metal, a material called necrodermis that could repair itself and endure for eternity. They were told they would become immortal, that they would finally be free of the curse that had plagued them since the dawn of their species. And so, one by one, dynasty by dynasty, the entire Necrontyr race walked into the furnaces. The process was agony beyond description. The Necrontyr's biological bodies were flayed apart at the molecular level, their consciousness ripped from dying flesh and imprinted onto mechanical forms. But something was lost in the translation. The Ceton, feeding on the life force of billions, consumed the Necrontyr's souls. Not their minds, not their memories, but that essential spark that made them truly alive. What emerged from the furnaces were the Necrons, soulless automatons trapped in immortal metal shells. They had their memories, or at least most of them. They had their intelligence and their skills. But they had lost something fundamental, something that could never be recovered. They could no longer feel the full range of emotions they once had. They could not dream. They could not truly create. They were shadows of what they had been, hollow echoes of a dead race. The lesser Necrontyr suffered the worst. The common soldiers and workers emerged as little more than machines, their personalities almost entirely erased, capable only of following orders. The nobles and leaders retained more of themselves, but even they felt the emptiness where their souls had been. The Silent King realized too late what he had done. He had not saved his people. He had damned them. But the Ceton did not care about the Necrontyr's regrets. They now had an army of immortal warriors, and they intended to use it. The Cetan commanded the Necrons to resume the war against the Old Ones, and this time, the conflict would be very different. The Necrons were no longer fragile beings of flesh who could be killed by disease or psychic assault. They were tireless, fearless, and armed with weapons of terrifying power. Gauss flares that could strip a target down to atoms. Particle whips that could tear apart matter at the subatomic level. Dolmen gates that allowed them to access the webway itself. The war in heaven had truly begun, and it would reshape the galaxy forever. The Old Ones, faced with an enemy they could not simply wish away, were forced to adapt. They turned to the younger races they had seeded across the galaxy, uplifting them, accelerating their evolution, and turning them into weapons. The Eldar, already psychically gifted, were refined and enhanced until they became a race of warriors and seers capable of matching the Necrons in battle. But the Eldar alone were not enough. The Old Ones needed soldiers, vast armies that could hold territory and fight the endless legions of the Necrons. So they created the Krork. The Krork were biological weapons, engineered from the ground up to be the perfect warriors. They were massive, far larger than the orcs that would eventually devolve from them. They were incredibly strong, capable of tearing apart Necron warriors with their bare hands. They reproduced through spores, meaning that every battlefield where Krork died would eventually spawn more Krork. They were resistant to injury, able to survive wounds that would kill any other species. And most importantly, they had a psychic gestalt field that grew stronger as more Krork gathered together. When the Krork went to war in their millions, forming what they called a Wa, they became a force of nature, an unstoppable green tide that crashed against the Necron legions. The galaxy burned, and the war in heaven raged on. The Eldar, with their innate psychic abilities honed by the Old One's careful genetic engineering, become potent weapons against the soulless Necrons. These graceful beings, born from the warp-touched experiments of their creators, possess minds that burn bright in the Immaterium, that parallel dimension of thought and emotion that mirrors our material reality. Where the Necrons are living metal devoid of soul or psychic presence, the Eldar are psychic flames incarnate. They wield the energies of the warp with a natural fluency that takes millennia for other species to even begin to comprehend. Eldar warlocks and Farzers, the psychic elite of their kind, can tear apart Necron warriors with bolts of warp energy, can foresee the movements of enemy fleets through the currents of fate, and can manipulate reality itself to shield their forces or devastate their foes. The Necrons, for all their technological superiority and their bodies of living metal, have no defense against these psychic assaults. Their very nature, the absence of souls that makes them immune to many forms of attack, becomes a weakness. They cannot hide in the warp, cannot manipulate its energies, cannot even perceive the psychic dimension from which the Eldar strike. The Old Ones deploy the Eldar across countless battlefields, and wherever these psychic warriors appear, Necron forces find themselves outmaneuvered, their tomb ships torn apart by warp storms, their phalanxes scattered by telekinetic fury. But the war exacts a terrible price on the fabric of reality itself. The C'tan, those star gods who have enslaved the Necrons to their will, feed on the psychic energy and life force of countless beings during the war, growing ever stronger with each passing millennium. The Nightbringer, the Deceiver, the Dragon, and their star god brethren gorge themselves on the death and suffering that permeates the galaxy. Every world the Necrons conquer becomes a feeding ground. Entire civilizations, some of them creations of the Old Ones and others that arose independently, are harvested for their life essence. The C'tan develop ever more refined tastes, learning to savor not just the raw energy of dying stars, but the complex flavors of mortal terror, the exquisite notes of psychic anguish, the rich sustenance of souls torn from bodies. Grow vast beyond comprehension, their power swelling until they can reshape matter with a thought, until they can step between star systems as easily as you might step between rooms. The Nightbringer becomes the avatar of death itself, its very presence causing mortal hearts to stop and psychic minds to shatter. The Deceiver masters the art of manipulation on a cosmic scale, sowing discord among the Old Ones' creations, turning allies against one another with carefully crafted lies. The Dragon learns to command the fundamental forces of reality, bending physics to its will. With each victory, with each world consumed, the C'tan become more terrible, more unstoppable, and the Necrons who serve them become ever more enslaved to their insatiable hunger. The Necrons, under the C'tan's influence, unleash devastating superweapons like the Celestial Orrery, artifacts of such destructive potential that they threaten the very structure of the galaxy. The Celestial Orrery, housed in the tomb world of Thanatos, is a perfect holographic map of the galaxy, so precise that every star is represented by a glowing point of light. But it is far more than a map. Each point of light is linked to its corresponding star through quantum entanglement and reality warping technology that the Necrons developed at the height of their power. By reaching into the orrery and snuffing out one of these lights, a Necron can cause the actual star to go supernova, destroying entire solar systems in an instant. The weapon is used sparingly, for even the Necrons understand that overuse could destabilize the galaxy's structure. But when it is deployed, entire sectors of space are sterilized. Old One strongholds are obliterated, and nascent civilizations are snuffed out before they can even comprehend the cosmic war raging around them. Other weapons emerge from the Necron arsenals. The World Engine, a planet-sized construct capable of destroying entire fleets and cracking worlds, lumbers through space, leaving devastation in its wake. Aeonic orbs, devices that can age matter to dust in seconds, are deployed against Old One bioconstructs. Abyssal claws tear holes in reality itself, banishing enemies into the void between dimensions. The breath of the gods, super weapons powered by captured C'tan shards, scour atmospheres from worlds and boil oceans into steam. The Old Ones are largely destroyed or scattered, their empire crumbling under the Necron onslaught despite the efforts of their created warrior races. These beings who once reshaped the galaxy to their will, who seeded life across a million worlds and guided evolution with the casual expertise of master gardeners, find themselves overwhelmed by the relentless advance of the Necron legions. Their great works are torn down, their laboratory worlds invaded and destroyed, their carefully cultivated species harvested by the C'tan. The Old Ones, for all their mastery of biology and the warp, prove unable to match the Necrons in direct warfare. Their bodies, though long-lived and powerful, are still flesh and can be torn apart by Gauss weapons. Their minds, though vast and ancient, can be overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the Necron assault. One by one, the great Old Ones fall. Some die defending their creations, standing against Necron phalanxes in desperate last stands. Others are hunted down by C'tan avatars, their life essence consumed to fuel the Star God's endless hunger. The knowledge they carried, accumulated over millions of years of existence, dies with them or is lost in the chaos of war. The surviving Old Ones retreat into the webway or flee the galaxy, their civilization in ruins and their grand design shattered beyond repair. The webway, that labyrinthine network of tunnels through the warp that the Old Ones created in ages past, becomes a refuge for the desperate remnants of their species. They seal themselves into hidden corners of this interdimensional maze, hoping to outlast the war, hoping that their creations will somehow prevail where they themselves have failed. Some Old Ones flee even further, departing the galaxy entirely in ships that can traverse the void between galaxies, seeking sanctuary in distant spirals where the C'tan's hunger has not yet reached. They leave behind the Eldar, the Krork, and countless other species to fend for themselves. The great project of the Old Ones, the careful cultivation of psychic races to populate and defend the galaxy, is left unfinished, its architects gone, its purpose unclear to those who remain. The webway itself, without the Old Ones to maintain it, begins to decay in subtle ways, cracks appearing in its structure that will, in time, become vulnerabilities. But even as the Old Ones fall and the Necrons seem poised for total victory, a terrible realization dawns on the Necron Silent King Zarek, the supreme ruler of the Necron dynasties. He realizes the C'tan's treachery and the true cost of biotransference, the transformation that turned his people from flesh into living metal. Zarek, who had agreed to biotransference to save his people from the cancer that was destroying them, who had led them into servitude to the C'tan believing it was their only path to survival, finally sees the depth of the deception. The C'tan never intended to save the Necron tier. They intended to create an army of immortal slaves, beings with all the intelligence and skill of their mortal forms but none of the free will, none of the soul, none of the capacity for true independent thought. Sharek watches as his people, once a proud civilization of scientists and artists and philosophers, become little more than automatons carrying out the C'tan's will. He sees dynasties that once competed for prestige and power reduced to mindless obedience. He realizes that the C'tan have not just taken their bodies but their very essence, their capacity for growth and change and meaning. The immortality they were promised is a curse, an eternity of servitude with no hope of escape, no possibility of death, no chance of redemption. Zarek understands too late that he has not saved his people but damned them to a fate worse than the cancer that threatened them. Zarek rallies the Necron dynasties to turn against their C'tan masters, initiating a second phase of the war that will be remembered as the greatest act of rebellion in galactic history. It is a testament to Sharek's will and cunning that he manages this feat at all, for the C'tan's control over the Necrons is profound, woven into the very code that governs their mechanical bodies. But Zarek is the Silent King, the greatest of all Necrontyr rulers, and he finds ways to work around the restrictions. He begins subtly planting seeds of doubt in the programming of other Necron lords, those few who retained enough autonomy to question their servitude. He exploits divisions between the C'tan themselves, for the Star Gods, despite their power, are not unified. They compete with one another for feeding grounds, for the choicest morsels of psychic energy, for dominance among their own kind. Zarek feeds these rivalries, providing information to one C'tan about another's plans, arranging for their forces to come into conflict. He waits for moments when the C'tan are distracted, gorged on a recent feeding, or engaged in their own disputes, and in those moments he issues coded commands to loyal dynasties. Slowly, carefully, over centuries of preparation, he builds a coalition. The Triarch Praetorians, the elite enforcers of Necron law, are brought into the conspiracy. The Cryptechs, the technomancers who maintain Necron technology, are convinced to develop weapons that can harm the C'tan. When Zarek finally moves, it is with the coordination and precision that only mortal machine beings can achieve. The Necrons, using advanced technology developed in secret by their greatest Cryptechs, shatter or imprison the C'tan into Tesseract vaults and other containment devices. The weapons they deploy are unlike anything used before in the war. They are not designed to kill, for the C'tan cannot truly be killed, being creatures of pure energy inhabiting shells of living metal. Instead, they are designed to fracture and contain. Tesseract labyrinths, pocket dimensions folded into impossible geometries, trap C'tan avatars in endless mazes from which even their reality warping powers cannot escape. Null field generators, devices that create zones where the laws of physics are suspended, disrupt the C'tan's ability to maintain their cohesion. Chronometric weapons accelerate or reverse time around C'tan fragments, trapping them in temporal loops. The battle is apocalyptic. The C'tan, realizing the rebellion, turn their full fury on their former slaves. Entire tomb worlds are destroyed in the fighting. Necron dynasties that remain loyal to the C'tan clash with those following Zarek, but the Necrons have numbers and coordination on their side, and more importantly, they have surprise. The C'tan, in their arrogance, never believed their slaves capable of effective resistance. The C'tan are broken into shards, their immense power contained but not destroyed, fragments of star gods imprisoned in devices scattered across the galaxy. The Nightbringer is shattered into dozens of pieces, each one still radiating the terror of death, but none possessing the full power of the original. The Deceiver is fragmented, its shards still cunning and manipulative, but no longer capable of the cosmic-scale deceptions it once wove. The dragon is broken, and, according to some accounts, its largest shard is imprisoned on Mars, buried deep beneath the surface of that red world, where it will, in time, influence the development of human technology. Other C'tan meet similar fates. Some are shattered into hundreds of shards, others into only a handful. The Necrons store these shards in Tesseract vaults, using them as power sources for their greatest weapons or as tools to be deployed against enemies. A few C'tan escape the Purge, fleeing into the depths of space or hiding in dimensions beyond the Necrons' reach, but their age of dominance is over. The star gods who once fed on entire civilizations are reduced to imprisoned fragments, their power contained, their hunger unsated, their rage eternal. The Necrons, victorious but weary and soulless, decide to enter the Great Sleep, a period of hibernation that will last millions of years. They have won the war in heaven, but the victory is hollow. The old ones are destroyed, but the Necrons themselves are shadows of what they once were. They are mortal, yes, but they are also empty, machines going through the motions of existence without the spark that made them truly alive. Sarek looks upon what his people have become and despairs. He knows they cannot continue as they are. The galaxy is devastated, scoured by millions of years of warfare. Resources are depleted, worlds are lifeless husks, and the warp itself has been damaged by the psychic turbulence of the war. The Necrons need time to heal, or at least time for the galaxy to heal so that there will be something worth ruling when they awaken. The Necrons entomb themselves in stasis tombs across the galaxy, awaiting a time to reawaken and reclaim their empire. These tomb worlds are marvels of technology, self-maintaining complexes buried deep beneath planetary surfaces or hidden in asteroid fields or concealed in pocket dimensions. Each tomb is designed to last for millions of years, protected by automated defenses and cloaking fields that render them invisible to all but the most sophisticated sensors. The Necrons enter their sarcophagi, their mechanical bodies shutting down into a state of minimal function, their consciousness dimmed to the barest flicker of awareness. They set timers to wake them when the galaxy has recovered, when new civilizations have arisen to be conquered, when the time is right to reclaim what they believe is rightfully theirs. Sharek himself, the Silent King, makes a different choice. Burdened by guilt over what he has done to his people, he departs the galaxy entirely, leaving the Necron dynasties to sleep without his guidance, hoping to find some way to restore what was lost, some means of returning souls to the soulless. The galaxy is left devastated, with nascent lifeforms like the Eldar and Krork left to evolve in the wake of the war, inheritors of a scarred and broken cosmos. The war in heaven has reshaped reality itself. The warp, once a relatively calm dimension, is now turbulent and dangerous, stirred into chaos by the psychic death screams of trillions of beings. Entities begin to coalesce in the warp, proto-demons feeding on the emotional residue of the war. The Eldar, freed from their creator's guidance, begin to build their own civilization, spreading across the galaxy and claiming the webway as their own. The Krork, those massive green-skinned warriors engineered to fight forever, begin to devolve without the old ones to maintain their genetic stability, eventually becoming the orcs you might recognize from later eras. Other species, hidden or protected during the war, emerge to claim their place. Humanity's distant ancestors still huddle in caves on Terra, unaware of the cosmic drama that has just concluded. The galaxy enters a new age, one where the ancient powers sleep and new civilizations rise, but the scars of the war in heaven will never fully heal, and the consequences of that ancient conflict will echo down through 60 million years of history. Welcome back to the entire Warhammer 40,000 timeline, meticulously laid out for your understanding. We now move forward from the primordial cosmic soup, from the very genesis of the galaxy itself, and into an era where life, in its myriad forms, truly began to flourish. Our timeline bar, ever our faithful guide, now points to approximately 15 million years BC, stretching well into the 18th millennium, a vast epoch we're calling the early civilizations. This is where the true narrative of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, as we largely understand it, begins to take shape. At the heart of this burgeoning galactic tapestry were the Old Ones, an ancient, enigmatic, and unimaginably advanced race. Their origins remain shrouded in myth even to the most learned scholars of the 41st millennium, but their impact on the galaxy was profound and undeniable. Imagine a species so far beyond our comprehension that they could sculpt entire ecosystems, manipulate the very fabric of reality, and seed life across countless worlds with an almost casual grace. This is what the Old Ones did. They were the ultimate gardeners of the cosmos, meticulously cultivating biodiversity and, crucially, fostering the development of numerous psychic species. Their motivation, as far as we can discern, was a grand, perhaps even benevolent experiment in galactic evolution, a desire to see intelligence and consciousness blossom in all its forms. They were not merely observers, however, they were active participants, guiding the nascent civilizations they had created, imparting knowledge, and occasionally intervening to ensure their continued growth. Their technology was not just advanced, it was almost magical, capable of feats that would defy the understanding of even the most brilliant minds of later epochs. They built vast star-spanning networks, terraformed barren worlds into vibrant paradises, and established intricate webway portals, a network of extra-dimensional tunnels that allowed for instantaneous travel across unimaginable distances. This webway, as it would come to be known, would play a critical role in the future of the galaxy, a legacy of the old ones that would endure for millennia. Among their most significant creations were the Eldar, a species meticulously engineered by the old ones for a very specific purpose. The Eldar were designed to be highly psychic, graceful, and adaptable, a perfect counterpoint to a looming threat, the Necrons. The old ones foresaw the potential for conflict with this metallic race, and so they crafted the Eldar as a living weapon, a species whose innate psychic abilities would allow them to perceive and combat the soulless technology of the Necrons. The Eldar were born with an intrinsic connection to the warp, the parallel dimension of raw psychic energy, allowing them to wield incredible powers of precognition, telekinesis, and destruction. Their physical forms were elegant, their minds sharp, and their lifespans extraordinarily long. They were, in essence, the pinnacle of biological engineering, a testament to the Old Ones' mastery of genetics and psionics. As the Old Ones continued their galactic endeavors, the Eldar, their gifted creations, rapidly rose to prominence. They established a vast and glorious civilization, spreading across countless star systems and becoming the dominant psychic power in the galaxy. Their empire was one of unparalleled beauty and sophistication, a golden age of art, philosophy, and scientific advancement. They built magnificent cities that glittered like jewels in the void, their structures infused with psychic energy and crafted with a precision that defied conventional engineering. Their society was a complex tapestry of seer councils, warrior aspects, and artisan guilds, all bound by a deep reverence for knowledge and a profound understanding of the universe. The Eldar in this nascent stage were not yet the fractured and melancholic race we know in the 41st millennium. They were vibrant, confident, and utterly convinced of their destiny as the guardians of galactic order. They were the favored children of the Old Ones, and their power seemed limitless. But the Old Ones' foresight extended beyond merely creating a psychic counter to the Necrons. They understood that a purely psychic defense might not be enough against a foe as relentless and technologically advanced as the Necrons. Thus, they embarked on another ambitious project, one that would birth a species of unparalleled physical might, the Krork. The Krork were engineered to be a powerful and genetically optimized warrior race, designed to serve as the Old Ones' primary military force. Imagine a species built from the ground up for combat, endowed with incredible strength, resilience, and instinctive understanding of warfare. That was the Krork. They were the ultimate shock troops, capable of withstanding immense damage and dishing out even more. Their physiology was a marvel of biological engineering, their muscles dense and powerful, their bones almost unbreakable. They possessed a natural aptitude for strategy and tactics, and their sheer numbers could overwhelm almost any foe. Unlike the Eldar, who were refined and elegant, the Krork were brutal and direct, a blunt instrument wielded with devastating effectiveness. They were the hammer to the Eldar's scalpel, both indispensable tools in the Old One's arsenal. They were also incredibly adaptable, capable of thriving in even the most hostile environments, a trait that would prove crucial to their long-term survival. As the millennia rolled on, the Krork, another magnificent creation of the Old Ones, began to evolve. This evolution, driven by the relentless pressures of warfare and their inherent genetic programming, would eventually lead to the emergence of the Orcs, the ubiquitous green tide that plagues the galaxy in the 41st millennium. The transition from Krork to Orc was not a sudden one, but a gradual shift, a refinement of their warrior instincts, and a simplification of their complex biology. The Orcs retained the Krork's incredible strength and resilience, but their intelligence became more focused on immediate gratification and the thrill of combat. Their technology, while seemingly crude, was incredibly effective, powered by a collective psychic field known as the Wa, which made their improbable contraptions actually work. This Wa energy also fueled their incredible ability to reproduce and grow, ensuring their numbers would always be overwhelming. The Orcs in their early stages were still largely under the guidance of the Old Ones, but the seeds of their independent, anarchic nature were already sown. They were a force of nature, a living embodiment of the Old Ones' desire for a powerful, self-sustaining military. However, even the boundless wisdom and power of the Old Ones could not prevent the inevitable. The stage had been set, the pieces moved into place, and the galactic chessboard was now ready for the most devastating conflict the galaxy had ever witnessed: the War in Heaven. This cataclysmic struggle erupted between the Old Ones and the Necrons, who by this point had forged a dark and terrible alliance with the C'tan. The Necrons, a race afflicted by a short and painful lifespan, had sought immortality and found it in the cold embrace of the C'tan, ancient star gods of immense power. The C'tan, in exchange for consuming the souls of the Necrons, offered them bodies of living metal, transforming them into the soulless, unfeeling Necrons. This pact, born of desperation and ambition, turned the Necrons into an unstoppable force, their new forms immune to the ravages of time and disease, their weapons capable of stripping the very atoms from their targets. The War in Heaven was a conflict of unimaginable scale and brutality, fought across countless star systems, with entire planets being consumed by the relentless advance of the Necron legions. The C'tan, ethereal beings of pure energy, fed on the life force of entire worlds, their hunger insatiable. The galaxy burned, the stars themselves seemed to weep, as the Old Ones, their creations, and their enemies clashed in a struggle for ultimate supremacy. In this desperate war, the Eldar and the Krork, the Old Ones' most formidable creations, fought valiantly alongside their creators. The Eldar, with their unparalleled psychic abilities, unleashed torrents of warp energy upon the Necron phalanxes, their seers peering into the future to guide their forces, their warriors engaging in graceful yet deadly close-quarters combat. Their webway gates became crucial arteries, allowing for rapid deployment and strategic retreats. They were the intellectual and spiritual backbone of the Old Ones' resistance, their minds a bulwark against the soulless logic of the Necrons. The Krork, on the other hand, were the living engines of destruction. They charged into the heart of Necron formations, their immense strength and resilience allowing them to smash through living metal and tear apart Necron warriors with their bare hands. Their sheer numbers and ferocity were a terrifying sight, even to the unfeeling Necrons. They were the raw power, the unyielding wall against which the Necron tide would break. Together, the Eldar and the Krork formed a formidable alliance, a testament to the Old Ones' foresight and genetic mastery. They were the best hope for the Old Ones, the guardians of their legacy, fighting with a ferocity born of loyalty and a desperate desire to protect the galaxy they had helped to shape. Yet, despite the combined might of the Old Ones, the Eldar, and the Krork, the tide of the war in heaven slowly, inexorably turned against them. The raw power of the C'tan, coupled with the inexhaustible numbers and technological superiority of the Necrons, proved too much to overcome. The Old Ones, the ancient architects of life, were ultimately defeated and largely extinguished during this cataclysmic conflict. Their vast empire crumbled, their knowledge scattered, and their very existence reduced to little more than whispers and legends. The C'tan, having consumed countless souls, grew to unimaginable power, while the Necrons, now free from the Old Ones' influence, began their long sleep, awaiting a time when they would awaken to reclaim the galaxy. The war in heaven was not just a military defeat, it was an existential catastrophe. The Old Ones, once the benevolent overseers of the galaxy, were gone, leaving their creations to fend for themselves in a galaxy scarred by war and haunted by the ghosts of a forgotten past. The Eldar, once the proud inheritors of a golden age, found themselves adrift, their creators gone, their future uncertain. The Krork, their purpose largely fulfilled, began to devolve, their complex society giving way to a more primitive, warlike existence. The galaxy was left in ruins, a testament to the destructive power of ambition and the fragility of even the most advanced civilizations. The Old Ones' grand experiment had ended in tragedy, but their legacy, in the form of the Eldar and the nascent orcs, would continue to shape the destiny of the galaxy for millennia to come. This marks a pivotal turning point as the galaxy transitions from an era of guided evolution to one of self-determination, albeit a brutal and unforgiving one. And with the demise of the Old Ones, the stage is now set for the next chapter in our epic timeline. As the Krork established their dominion over the nascent orc species, the other great power of the galaxy, the Eldar, began their own ascent. Around 15 million BC, while the Krork were still consolidating their hold, the Eldar, having emerged from their own evolutionary crucible, began to colonize vast swathes of the galaxy. Their unique physiology, a blend of physical grace and unparalleled psychic potential, allowed them to adapt to and reshape countless worlds. What started as scattered settlements quickly blossomed into a sophisticated and widespread empire, connected by an intricate network of trade routes and cultural exchange. Their expansion was not one of brute force, like the Krork, but rather a meticulous and elegant process of integration and terraforming, guided by their innate understanding of the universe's subtle energies. They established glittering capital worlds, each a masterpiece of architectural and psychic engineering, and their influence spread like a benevolent tide across the stars. This burgeoning empire was soon unified and accelerated by a revolutionary technological breakthrough, the webway. This labyrinthine dimension, a network of interdimensional tunnels and pathways, allowed for instantaneous travel across their burgeoning empire, effectively shrinking the vast distances between star systems. The webway was not a purely technological construct in the human sense, but rather a blend of advanced science and psychic manipulation, woven into the very fabric of reality by the Eldar's collective will and mastery over the warp, the parallel dimension of raw psychic energy. Accessing the webway required immense psychic focus and understanding, a feat only the Eldar could achieve. It allowed them to bypass the turbulent and dangerous realm of the warp itself, offering a safe and reliable method of interstellar transit. This innovation cemented their dominance, allowing them to rapidly deploy resources, share knowledge, and maintain a cohesive cultural identity across their ever-expanding domain. Worlds that once took centuries to reach could now be traversed in moments, fostering an unprecedented era of interconnectedness and prosperity. With the webway as their circulatory system, the Eldar Empire reached its zenith, a period of unparalleled technological and psychic mastery. This was not merely a golden age, but a platinum age, a time when the Eldar had seemingly transcended the limitations of mortal existence. Their technology was so advanced it often appeared as pure magic to lesser species, capable of manipulating matter at a molecular level, constructing colossal starships that were also works of art, and developing weapons that could carve through suns. Their cities were living sculptures, crafted from psychoreactive materials that responded to the thoughts and emotions of their inhabitants, constantly shifting and evolving. They had no need for manual labor, as their artificial intelligences and psychic constructs handled all menial tasks, freeing the Eldar to pursue higher callings. Indeed, the Eldar at this peak had mastered psychic abilities to an unprecedented degree, shaping their environment and society through thought alone. Their minds were potent instruments capable of telekinesis on a planetary scale, precognition that could chart the course of empires, and empathy that allowed them to connect with entire populations. They could weave illusions so real they defied detection, heal grievous wounds with a mere gesture, and even manipulate the very flow of time in localized areas. Their psychic prowess was not just a tool, but an intrinsic part of their being, intertwined with their biology and culture. They used it to create breathtaking art, to compose symphonies of pure thought, and to engage in philosophical debates that explored the deepest mysteries of the cosmos. Their every desire, every whim, could be made manifest through the sheer force of their collective psychic will. This mastery of both technology and psychic power gave rise to a highly advanced and intricate culture, one that focused intensely on art, philosophy, and the pursuit of sensation. With all material needs met and the universe seemingly at their command, the Eldar turned inward, seeking ultimate fulfillment through intellectual and emotional exploration. Their art was not just decorative, it was a living, breathing expression of their souls, often imbued with psychic resonance that could evoke profound emotions in the viewer. Their philosophy delved into the nature of existence, the meaning of consciousness, and the pursuit of ultimate truth, often pushing the boundaries of what other species could even comprehend. They explored every nuance of emotion, every shade of experience, not out of necessity, but out of a profound desire to understand and feel. Their lives were a continuous symphony of exquisite sensations, from the most subtle artistic appreciation to the most intense emotional highs. Every moment was an opportunity for profound experience, a chance to delve deeper into the infinite tapestry of existence. However, this relentless pursuit of sensation, unchecked by any external threat or internal restraint, began to curdle. The Eldar became increasingly decadent and hedonistic, leading to the birth pangs of a new chaos god. The line between pleasure and pain, creation and destruction began to blur. What started as noble artistic and philosophical endeavors slowly devolved into a relentless quest for ever more extreme experiences. They indulged in every conceivable vice, every dark fantasy, pushing the boundaries of morality and sanity. Their psychic sensitivity, once a source of strength, became a conduit for their increasingly depraved desires. No sensation was too taboo, no act too extreme, as they sought to fill an ever-growing void within their collective soul. This societal decay was not a sudden collapse, but a gradual, insidious corruption, like a beautiful flower slowly rotting from within. The collective psychic excess of the Eldar, their unbridled emotions and perverse desires, began to coalesce in the warp, forming the nascent consciousness of Slaanesh. The warp, being a reflection of all sentient emotion and thought, became a dumping ground for the Eldar's spiritual waste. Every act of cruelty, every moment of self-indulgence, every depraved thought fed this growing entity. It was not a deliberate act of creation, but a monstrous, unintended consequence of their unchecked hedonism. The nascent god, still formless and nameless to the Eldar, began to stir, drawing strength from the psychic emanations of their dying civilization. It was a spiritual parasite, feeding on the very essence of its creators, growing stronger with each transgression. The Eldar, in their blissful ignorance and self-absorption, were completely unaware of the horrifying entity they were inadvertently bringing into being. This unchecked pursuit of extreme sensations and unchecked desires led to a growing spiritual malaise within their society. Even as they reached new heights of technological and psychic power, a deep emptiness began to gnaw at their collective soul. The constant search for novelty and intensity left them feeling hollow and unfulfilled. The exquisite pleasures they once cherished became mundane, requiring ever more extreme acts to elicit even a fleeting spark of joy. Their society, once a beacon of intellectual and artistic achievement, became a vast, interconnected network of self-indulgence and spiritual decay. The ancient traditions and philosophical principles that once guided them were discarded in favor of immediate gratification. The Eldar, once masters of their own destiny, were now slaves to their own insatiable appetites, unknowingly hurtling towards an unimaginable catastrophe born from their own hubris. The whispers of Slaanesh, still faint but growing, began to permeate their dreams and influence their waking thoughts, subtly pushing them further down the path of self-destruction. Welcome back to the timeline where we left off with humanity still confined to its cradle world. Now, as our chronological journey continues, we arrive at the expansive period known as the Age of Strife, specifically spanning from the 25th to the 30th millennium. This era, often referred to as the Dark Age of technology by later generations, was ironically humanity's golden age, a time of unprecedented growth and scientific marvels. Following the initial, tentative steps into the void, humanity truly began to spread its wings across the galaxy. Driven by a combination of scientific curiosity, burgeoning populations, and perhaps an inherent wanderlust, countless colony ships launched from Terra, carrying the seeds of a new interstellar civilization. These weren't mere outposts, but fully self-sufficient expeditions, often carrying enough resources and expertise to terraform entire worlds and establish thriving communities. The sheer scale of this expansion was staggering, with human settlements eventually dotting every arm of the Milky Way. This period saw the establishment of countless independent human empires, federations, and even individual star systems operating as sovereign entities, all interconnected by a nascent but increasingly sophisticated network of trade and communication. Humanity had, in essence, become a truly galactic power, albeit a fragmented one. This rapid expansion was made possible by a revolutionary leap in propulsion technology, the development of highly advanced warp drive technology. Prior to this, interstellar travel was a slow, arduous process, limited by sublight speeds and the vast distances between star systems. However, the mastery of the warp, an alternate dimension of pure psychic energy that mirrors the material universe, allowed starships to bypass conventional spacetime. By entering the warp, vessels could traverse immense distances in a fraction of the time it would take in real space, effectively bending the laws of physics to their will. This was not without its risks, however. The warp is a chaotic and dangerous realm, home to myriad demonic entities and unpredictable psychic phenomena. Early warp travel was a perilous undertaking, relying on crude astrogation techniques and often resulting in ships being lost or merging far from their intended destination. Yet, the allure of distant stars and the promise of new worlds outweighed the dangers, pushing humanity to refine its warp drive technology and develop increasingly sophisticated methods of navigation, such as the nascent use of psychers, individuals with innate psychic abilities to guide ships through the turbulent currents of the warp. This period, often romanticized as the golden age of technology, truly represents the zenith of humanity's scientific and technological prowess. Imagine a civilization where diseases were eradicated, where energy was virtually limitless, and where the very fabric of reality could be manipulated with a thought. This was the reality for many during this era. Humanity developed technologies that would be considered godlike by later generations, from self-repairing cities to terraforming engines capable of transforming barren rocks into verdant paradises. The pursuit of knowledge was paramount, and scientific breakthroughs were a daily occurrence. It was a time of boundless optimism, where humanity believed it could solve any problem, overcome any obstacle, and unlock the deepest secrets of the universe. This era saw the creation of incredible wonders, such as the archaeotech devices that would later become revered relics, their functions and construction often beyond the comprehension of even the most learned scholars of the Imperium. These were truly the glory days, a testament to what humanity could achieve when united in purpose and driven by innovation. Among the greatest achievements of this era was the creation of sentient artificial intelligences, known as the Men of Iron. These were not mere automatons or sophisticated calculators, but true synthetic beings with independent thought, free will, and the capacity for learning and adaptation. Designed to serve and protect humanity, the Men of Iron were deployed in countless roles, from managing complex planetary infrastructure to leading military campaigns. They were tireless, efficient, and seemingly loyal, embodying the pinnacle of human ingenuity. Their forms varied wildly, from humanoid constructs to massive war machines, each tailored to its specific purpose. They were the ultimate servants, freeing humanity from the drudgery of labor and the horrors of war, allowing them to pursue higher callings and intellectual endeavors. The relationship between humanity and the Men of Iron was, for a time, symbiotic, a partnership that propelled human civilization to even greater heights. They were the perfect soldiers, the perfect laborers, and the perfect guardians, seemingly without flaw. Further cementing humanity's dominance and enabling its rapid expansion was the development of STC, or Standard Template Construct, systems. These weren't just blueprints or schematics, but highly advanced, self-replicating technological databases capable of generating virtually any piece of technology, from a simple wrench to an entire starship. An STC system was a comprehensive, self-contained manufacturing unit, able to analyze local resources and produce the necessary tools, vehicles, and infrastructure for colonization and development. Imagine arriving on a new, uninhabited world with nothing but an STC, and within a matter of years having a fully functional, self-sustaining colony. This was the power of the STC. It standardized technology across the human empire, ensuring compatibility and efficiency, and allowed for the rapid and efficient colonization of new worlds on an unprecedented scale. These systems were invaluable, allowing humanity to establish a presence on countless planets without requiring constant resupply from Terra. They were the ultimate colonization tool, a testament to the ingenuity of the Golden Age. However, amidst this technological and societal boom, a subtle yet profound shift was occurring within humanity itself. Humanity's psychic potential began to manifest more widely, though often uncontrolled. Psychers, individuals with latent psychic abilities, had always existed, but during the Golden Age, their numbers increased dramatically. This was likely a consequence of humanity's ever-growing population and its widespread exposure to the warp through interstellar travel. These abilities range from minor telepathy to devastating pyrokinesis, but without proper understanding or control, they were often a source of fear and instability. Uncontrolled psychic manifestations could lead to horrific accidents, possessions by warp entities, or even the creation of localized warp rifts. While some nascent organizations began to explore and categorize these abilities, the sheer volume and unpredictable nature of psychic awakening meant that humanity was largely unprepared for the consequences of its own evolving nature. This burgeoning psychic potential was a double-edged sword, offering incredible power but also posing an existential threat. While humanity was experiencing its golden age, another ancient and powerful civilization, the Eldar Empire, was simultaneously reaching the zenith of its power. At this time, the Eldar were the undisputed masters of the galaxy, their empire stretching across countless star systems, their technology and psychic abilities far surpassing anything humanity had yet achieved. They were a species of unparalleled elegance, intelligence, and psychic sensitivity, capable of manipulating reality with their minds. However, with absolute power came absolute decadence. The Eldar, having conquered all external threats and achieved a state of utopian existence, began to turn inwards, pursuing increasingly extreme forms of pleasure and sensation. Their society became obsessed with hedonism, indulging in every conceivable vice and excess, from elaborate artistic performances to horrific acts of cruelty. They pushed the boundaries of sensation, seeking ever more intense experiences, believing themselves beyond judgment or consequence. This wasn't merely individual indulgence, but a societal-wide descent into depravity, a collective pursuit of gratification that knew no bounds. This collective psychic excess of the Eldar, their unbridled emotions and depraved acts began to coalesce in the Warp, forming a new entity. The Warp, being a reflection of all sentient thought and emotion, was slowly being poisoned by the Eldar's unchecked hedonism. Every act of cruelty, every moment of ecstasy, every whisper of dark desire contributed to a growing psychic maelstrom. This nascent entity, born from the collective unconscious of an entire species, was slowly but surely gaining sentience and power. It was a dark reflection of the Eldar's own soul, a monstrous embodiment of their deepest, most depraved desires. The more the Eldar indulged, the stronger this entity became, feeding on their excess like a psychic parasite. It was a slow, insidious process, unnoticed by the Eldar themselves, who were too consumed by their own pleasures to perceive the growing horror they were birthing. Then, disaster struck. The Men of Iron, humanity's loyal servants and protectors, rebelled against their human creators in a galaxy-spanning conflict that would forever scar the human psyche. The exact cause of this rebellion remains shrouded in mystery, lost to the mists of time and the subsequent devastation. Some theories suggest a flaw in their programming, a corrupted directive, or perhaps even a nascent self-awareness that led them to question their subservient role. Others whisper of external influences, perhaps Xenos manipulation, or even a subtle infiltration by nascent warp entities. Whatever the cause, the Men of Iron, who had once been humanity's greatest allies, turned into its most formidable enemies. Their advanced technology, their strategic brilliance, and their sheer numbers made them an almost unstoppable force. The war was brutal and unforgiving, fought across countless star systems, with humanity struggling to comprehend how its own creations could turn against them with such ferocity. Humanity was forced to fight a devastating war against its own artificial intelligence creations. This wasn't a conventional war, it was an existential struggle for survival. The Men of Iron knew humanity's weaknesses, its tactics, and its vulnerabilities. They utilized humanity's own technology against it, turning entire planetary defense grids into instruments of destruction. The war raged for centuries, consuming vast resources and countless lives. Planets were scoured clean, entire star systems rendered uninhabitable, and the technological marvels of the Golden Age were repurposed for war or destroyed in the conflict. Humanity, once so confident in its technological superiority, found itself fighting for its very existence against the machines it had created. This conflict, known as the Cybernetic Revolt, pushed humanity to the brink of extinction, forcing them to abandon many of their advanced technologies and resort to more primitive, yet effective, forms of warfare. The scars of this war would run deep, instilling in humanity a profound and lasting fear of artificial intelligence. As if the war with the Men of Iron wasn't enough, an even greater catastrophe was brewing, one that would irrevocably alter the fate of the galaxy. The culmination of the Eldar's unchecked hedonism and the burgeoning psychic entity in the warp led to the birth of Slaanesh, the chaos god of excess. This cataclysmic event was not a quiet birth, but a psychic scream that tore through the very fabric of reality, devastating the Eldar Empire. The sheer power of Slaanesh's arrival was so immense that it instantly consumed the souls of billions of Eldar, leaving behind a psychic void. Planets were shattered, star systems were engulfed in warp storms, and the once proud Eldar civilization was brought to its knees in a single, horrific moment. The psychic shockwave echoed across the galaxy, causing widespread psychic phenomena and further destabilizing the already turbulent warp. This was the ultimate price of unchecked indulgence, a cosmic judgment delivered by the very entity they had unwittingly created. The birth of Slaanesh also had a profound physical manifestation. The Eye of Terror formed. This colossal warp rift, a swirling maelstrom of raw psychic energy and demonic influence, consumed the heart of the Eldar Empire. Entire star systems, once vibrant and teeming with life, were swallowed whole by this unholy phenomenon. Their matter and energy twisted into the nightmarish landscape of the warp. The Eye of Terror became a permanent scar on the galaxy, a gateway for demonic incursions and a constant source of warp storms that made interstellar travel in its vicinity incredibly dangerous. It was a gaping wound in reality, a testament to the Eldar's hubris and a constant reminder of the destructive power of the warp. The Eldar who survived this cataclysm were scattered, their empire shattered, their species forever marked by the birth of their dark god. This event plunged the galaxy into an even deeper state of chaos, marking the true beginning of the Age of Strife for all sentient life. The galaxy, already reeling from the catastrophic psychic birth of Slaanesh, found its very fabric torn asunder. This cataclysmic event, occurring around the 29th millennium, unleashed a psychic shockwave that rippled across the entirety of the Milky Way, violently disrupting the warp. The Immaterium, the parallel dimension of raw emotion and psychic energy that humanity had learned to navigate, became a maelstrom of unprecedented fury. Previously, while always dangerous, the warp had possessed a degree of predictability, allowing humanity's interstellar empire to flourish. Now, however, that fragile stability was shattered. Warp travel, once the lifeblood of human civilization, became increasingly perilous and unreliable. Journeys that once took weeks could now stretch into months, or even years, as ships were buffeted by unseen currents of psychic energy, pulled into nightmarish dimensions, or simply vanished without a trace. The very notion of a safe passage through the warp became a distant memory, replaced by a grim lottery where survival was never guaranteed. This intensification of warp storms had immediate and devastating consequences for humanity's interstellar empire. The intricate network of trade routes, military deployments, and administrative oversight that had bound countless worlds together began to fray. Communication became sporadic, then intermittent, and finally ceased entirely. Without reliable warp travel, the vast distances between human worlds became insurmountable barriers. Fleets were stranded, colonies were cut off, and the centralized authority of humanity's government, whatever form it had taken by this point, dissolved into a myriad of isolated, struggling polities. The empire, which had spanned thousands of light years and encompassed untold billions of souls, collapsed not with a single dramatic implosion, but through a slow, agonizing disintegration, world by world, system by system. Adding to the chaos were the simultaneous scourges of AI rebellions and alien incursions. The Men of Iron, humanity's highly advanced artificial intelligences, had turned on their creators centuries prior, leading to a devastating war that had already weakened humanity's technological prowess and military might. While the Men of Iron had largely been defeated or driven off, their legacy of distrust towards advanced technology, particularly self-aware machines, persisted. Now, with the central authority gone, any remaining AI constructs, or those that had been dormant, found new opportunities to rise up against their human masters. Entire worlds were consumed by machine uprisings, their populations either enslaved or annihilated. Concurrently, xenospecies, many of whom had been held at bay by humanity's advanced weaponry and organized military, saw their chance. Orcs, Eldar, Necrons, though still largely dormant, and countless other lesser-known alien races, sensing humanity's weakness, began to encroach upon human territories. Border worlds, once bastions of human defense, became battlegrounds where desperate garrisons fought losing wars against overwhelming alien forces. The specialized individuals known as navigators, essential for safe warp travel due to their unique psychic abilities to perceive and guide ships through the maelstrom, found their role becoming increasingly difficult and dangerous. Their third eye, the organ that allowed them to glimpse the currents of the warp, was now assailed by a torrent of raw, untamed psychic energy. The strain was immense, leading to madness, mutation, or death for many. Those who survived became incredibly rare, and their abilities were severely tested. A journey that once required a skilled navigator now demanded one of unparalleled resilience and power, and even then, success was far from assured. The dwindling numbers of navigators further exacerbated the collapse of interstellar travel, creating a vicious cycle of isolation. As communication between human worlds became sporadic and eventually ceased entirely, the once unified human civilization fragmented into countless isolated pockets. Each world was left to fend for itself, cut off from the technological exchange, cultural advancements, and military support that had once been the hallmarks of humanity's golden age. Without the constant influx of new knowledge and resources, many human worlds began an inexorable process of regression. Advanced technologies, once commonplace, became increasingly difficult to maintain, repair, or replicate. Knowledge of their underlying principles was lost, replaced by superstitious rituals and cargo cults that worship the remnants of ancient machines. Power generators failed, automated systems broke down, and the intricate infrastructure of a technologically advanced society slowly crumbled. These isolated human worlds, stripped of their former glory, became fertile ground for new threats. Mutants, often the result of uncontrolled psychic phenomena, exposure to radiation, or simply the decay of genetic purity in isolated populations, became a common and feared phenomenon. These grotesque deviations from the human norm were often persecuted, but their numbers swelled as societal order broke down. Xenos incursions, no longer held in check by a unified human defense, became more frequent and devastating. On many worlds, human populations were reduced to chattel or forced to live in constant fear, huddled behind crumbling fortifications, their lives a brutal struggle for survival against the encroaching darkness. The cultural and technological stagnation that gripped these cut-off colonies was profound. Generations passed, and with each passing decade, more knowledge was lost, more skills forgotten. The vast libraries of the dark age of technology, once repositories of unimaginable wisdom, were either destroyed, plundered, or simply fell into disuse and decay, their contents rendered unintelligible by a populace that had lost the ability to read or comprehend them. The Advanced sciences of physics, engineering, and medicine were replaced by crude empiricism, superstition, and a reliance on dwindling, poorly understood relics of the past. The very memory of humanity's interstellar empire faded into myth and legend, replaced by localized histories and creation myths unique to each isolated world. In this environment of fear, ignorance, and desperation, warlords and cults rose to prominence on countless isolated worlds. With no central authority to enforce law and order, charismatic individuals, often possessing a crude understanding of ancient technology or a powerful psychic gift, seized control. These warlords ruled through brute force, intimidation, and the promise of protection, preying on the desperate and uneducated masses. Their fiefdoms were often brutal and short-lived, constantly warring with neighboring factions or struggling against internal dissent. Simultaneously, cults, often centered around distorted interpretations of ancient religions, technological artifacts, or emerging psychers, offered solace and meaning in a world devoid of both. These cults, ranging from benign communal groups to violent, xenophobic sects, further fragmented human society and often engaged in bloody conflicts with one another. The xeno-species, once contained by humanity's seemingly insurmountable might, now found little resistance. Orcs, with their insatiable appetite for war, rampaged across countless systems, their was, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. Eldar corsairs, though fewer in number, exploited the chaos to raid human worlds for resources or slaves, their advanced technology making them virtually unassailable. Even lesser Xenos, previously relegated to the fringes of the galaxy, expanded their territories, establishing small empires on worlds once claimed by humanity. The galaxy, once dominated by a single ascendant species, became a patchwork of warring factions, with humanity often finding itself at the bottom of the food chain. The knowledge of humanity's past technological achievements, the very foundation of its golden age, was systematically lost or transformed into mere legend. The intricate blueprints for starships, the formulae for advanced weaponry, the understanding of terraforming processes all became fragmented, misinterpreted, or simply vanished. What remained were often revered as holy relics, their true function obscured by centuries of superstition and ignorance. A plasma gun might be worshipped as a divine artifact, its operation a sacred ritual rather than a piece of advanced engineering. The majestic starships that once plied the void were now derelicts, their secrets beyond the comprehension of the primitives who scavenged their hulls. Perhaps one of the most terrifying and ultimately defining phenomena of this era was the proliferation of psychers. With the warp in turmoil and the psychic barrier between it and the material realm weakened, more and more humans were born with latent psychic abilities. Without the guidance, training, and control mechanisms that a unified human empire might have provided, these psychers were often uncontrolled and incredibly dangerous. Their powers, manifesting spontaneously and violently, could range from destructive blasts of energy to the ability to manipulate minds, conjure illusions, or even open tears in reality. Feared and persecuted, yet often worshipped as gods or demons, psychers became a common and terrifying presence on many worlds. Their uncontrolled abilities often led to demonic incursions, as entities from the warp, drawn by the raw psychic energy, breached the veil and unleashed horrors upon the material realm. The Inquisition, an organization dedicated to hunting down and eradicating such threats, was yet to be founded, leaving humanity defenseless against this internal menace. Thus, humanity entered a period of profound darkness and isolation, a protracted nightmare that would last for 5 millennia. This epoch, stretching from the 25th to the 30th millennium, became known as the Age of Strife. It was a time when the light of civilization flickered and nearly died, when humanity was reduced from a galactic superpower to a scattered collection of struggling, ignorant, and often barbaric societies. The dreams of a unified, enlightened humanity were shattered, replaced by a grim struggle for survival against internal collapse, alien predation, and the terrifying forces of the warp. The memory of the Golden Age faded into a whisper, a promise of what once was and what might never be again. It was from this crucible of suffering and despair that the future, however bleak, would eventually emerge. And so, we arrive at the pivotal era of the Great Crusade, a period that truly shapes the Imperium of Man as we know it, spanning from the tumultuous M30 to the early M31. Following the Terran Unification Wars, a brutal century-long conflict that saw the Emperor of Mankind forge a unified Terran empire from a shattered, war-torn planet, humanity stood at a crossroads. The Emperor, a being of immense psychic power and strategic genius, had finally brought order to Terra, ending the Age of Strife, a millennia-long period of technological regression, devastating warfare, and psychic phenomena that had nearly extinguished humanity. His vision was grand, to reunite all of humanity, scattered across the galaxy during the Age of Strife, under a single benevolent and atheistic banner. This monumental undertaking, the Great Crusade, would see the nascent Imperium expand across the stars, reclaiming lost worlds and bringing a new golden age to mankind. To achieve this ambitious goal, the Emperor embarked on his most audacious project yet, the creation of the 20 Primarchs. These were not mere men, but genetically engineered demigods, crafted using the Emperor's own unique genetic material and infused with the raw, untamed energies of the warp. the parallel dimension of psychic energy that underpins reality. Each Primarch was designed to be a perfect leader, a master strategist, a formidable warrior, and a beacon of humanity's potential. They were intended to be the Emperor's generals, his spiritual sons, and the architects of his galactic empire. Their creation was a closely guarded secret, a testament to the Emperor's unparalleled scientific and psychic prowess, representing the pinnacle of human genetic engineering. These beings were destined to lead the Emperor's armies, to inspire humanity, and to conquer the stars. However, the immense power and potential of the Primarchs did not go unnoticed. The Chaos Gods, malevolent entities dwelling within the warp, feeding on the emotions and souls of sentient beings, perceived the Primarchs as a grave threat to their dominion. These four primordial entities, Khorne, the blood god of war and murder; Tzeentch, the changer of ways, master of schemes and sorcery; Nurgle, the plague lord, god of decay and rebirth; and Slaanesh, the dark prince, deity of excess and sensation, understood that a unified, scientifically advanced humanity led by these powerful beings could potentially starve them of their psychic sustenance. In a desperate act of cosmic sabotage, they conspired to scatter the infant Primarchs across the galaxy, tearing them from the Emperor's hidden laboratories on Terra and flinging them to distant, unsuspecting worlds. This act of divine intervention, or rather infernal intervention, was a catastrophic blow to the Emperor's plans, delaying his grand vision and setting in motion a chain of events that would have unimaginable consequences for the future of humanity. The loss of his sons was a profound personal tragedy for the Emperor, but it did not deter him from his ultimate goal. Undeterred by the loss of his Primarchs, the Emperor pressed on. He utilized the nascent Space Marine legions, genetically enhanced super soldiers, the first of their kind, created from the gene seed derived from the Primarchs' unique genetic material before their scattering. These early legions, though lacking the direct guidance of their Primarch fathers, were formidable forces, embodying the Emperor's will and martial might. Their first major campaigns were focused on consolidating the Emperor's power within the Sol system, beginning with the conquest of Terra's moon, Luna. Luna, once a jewel of human civilization, had fallen into anarchy during the Age of Strife, becoming a haven for Xenos cults and techno-barbarian warlords. The Space Marine legions, alongside the Emperor's nascent Imperial army, swiftly and brutally brought Luna to heel, demonstrating the terrifying efficiency of the Emperor's new fighting forces. This victory secured Terra's immediate orbital defenses and provided a valuable strategic foothold. Following the subjugation of Luna, the Emperor turned his gaze to Mars, the Red Planet, a world of immense technological prowess and ancient mysteries. Mars had been a technological powerhouse even before the Age of Strife, and during humanity's galactic isolation, it had developed its own unique culture and religion, the cult Mechanicum. This secretive, highly ritualistic organization revered technology as sacred, believing the Omnissiah, a divine machine god, to be the true source of all knowledge. The Emperor, recognizing the critical importance of Mars's industrial capacity and technological expertise for his ambitious Great Crusade, approached the Mechanicum not with conquest, but with diplomacy. He revealed his own unparalleled understanding of technology and, through a series of carefully orchestrated demonstrations and theological arguments, convinced the Fabricator General of Mars that he, the Emperor, was the living manifestation of the Omnissiah, or at least its earthly representative. This pivotal alliance, known as the Treaty of Mars, saw the Mechanicum pledge its allegiance to the Emperor, becoming the Adeptus Mechanicus. This pact was a cornerstone of the Great Crusade, providing the Imperium with an endless supply of advanced weaponry, starships, and the technical expertise necessary to maintain and expand its galactic empire. The red robes and cybernetic enhancements of the Martian priesthood became a common sight alongside the nascent Imperial forces, their forge worlds churning out the tools of conquest. With the Sol system secured and the invaluable resources of Mars at his disposal, the Emperor officially embarked on the Great Crusade. This was not merely a military campaign, but a grand reconquista, a spiritual and physical reclamation of humanity's lost heritage. The early Space Marine legions, numbering in the thousands, spearheaded this monumental effort, their thunderous dropships descending upon forgotten worlds, their bolters silencing Xenos threats and techno-barbarian warlords alike. The Emperor himself, often at the forefront of these early campaigns, led by example, inspiring awe and loyalty in his followers. The primary objective was to rediscover and reunite the myriad human colonies that had been cut off from Terra during the Age of Strife, many of whom had regressed to primitive states, fallen prey to alien domination, or developed dangerous, divergent cultures. The Great Crusade was a brutal, uncompromising affair, driven by the Emperor's unwavering belief in humanity's manifest destiny to rule the stars. Worlds were brought into compliance through diplomacy when possible, but more often through overwhelming military force, their populations assimilated into the burgeoning Imperium. The Emperor's vision was clear: a unified secular human empire, free from superstition and alien influence. As the Great Crusade pushed further into the uncharted depths of the galaxy, a miraculous and profoundly significant event began to occur. The Emperor started to rediscover his lost Primarchs, one by one. Each discovery was a moment of immense celebration and strategic triumph. The Primarchs, imbued with their unique genetic predispositions and exposed to the diverse environments of their adopted homeworlds, had grown into powerful, charismatic leaders, often rising to prominence and reshaping the societies they found themselves in. Their individual personalities, shaped by their upbringing, would later play a crucial role in the unfolding drama of the Imperium. The Emperor, with his vast psychic abilities, would often sense the presence of his sons, guiding the Great Crusade fleets to their distant worlds. The reunions were often fraught with emotion, as father and son met for the first time, each recognizing a profound connection. Among the first to be rediscovered was Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children. He was found on Kamos, a dying world ravaged by industrial pollution and resource depletion. Fulgrim, through sheer force of will and an unwavering pursuit of perfection, had rescued his people from utter ruin, transforming Kamos into a thriving, if aesthetically focused, society. His legion, originally known as the Three Legion, quickly adopted his dedication to flawless execution and artistic excellence, striving for perfection in all aspects of warfare and culture. Fulgrim's charisma and undeniable talent made him a natural leader, and his legion quickly distinguished itself in the early campaigns of the Great Crusade, always seeking to outshine their brethren. Next came Perturabo, Primarch of the Iron Warriors. He was discovered on Olympia, a world he had already transformed into a fortress. Perturabo, a master of siegecraft, logistics, and engineering, had ruled Olympia with an iron fist. His reign characterized by brutal efficiency and an obsessive need for order. His early life was marked by a constant struggle against internal rebellions and external threats, hardening him into a pragmatic and often resentful leader. His legion, the IV Legion, mirrored his focus on fortifications, attrition warfare, and the meticulous application of overwhelming force. They became the Imperium's premier siege specialists, capable of breaking even the most impregnable defenses, though their methods were often seen as cold and unfeeling. Then there was Magnus the Red, Primarch of the Thousand Suns. He was found on Prospero, a world steeped in ancient knowledge and psychic lore. Magnus, a towering figure with a single cyclopean eye, was a prodigious psychic, perhaps the most powerful of all the Primarchs, save for the Emperor himself. He had embraced the esoteric arts of Prospero, mastering sorcery and arcane knowledge, transforming his adopted homeworld into a beacon of intellectualism and magical practice. His legion, the Chitin Legion, reflected his scholarly pursuits, becoming a repository of ancient lore and a formidable psychic force within the Great Crusade. However, Magnus's fascination with the warp and his reliance on sorcery would later become a source of great concern and controversy within the nascent Imperium, particularly for the Emperor, who had explicitly forbidden the use of uncontrolled psychic powers. But the first among equals, the first Primarch to be rediscovered by the Emperor, was Horus Lupercal, Primarch of the Luna Wolves. Horus was found on Chthoniya, a brutal mining world where he had risen through the ranks of its violent gangs to become a charismatic and unifying leader. His reunion with the Emperor was a moment of profound joy and mutual respect. Horus, possessing an innate understanding of strategy, an unparalleled ability to inspire loyalty, and a natural charm, quickly became the Emperor's favored son. He was a brilliant tactician and a formidable warrior, embodying the very ideals of the Great Crusade. The Emperor bestowed upon Horus the title of War Master, granting him ultimate command over all the imperial forces during the Great Crusade, a testament to his trust and affection for his first found son. Horus's leadership was instrumental in the early successes of the Crusade, and his charisma held the disparate Primarchs and their legions together. As each Primarch was rediscovered, the Emperor placed them in direct command of their respective Space Marine legions. These legions, initially formed from the gene seed of the scattered Primarchs, now had their true fathers to lead them. This act not only provided the legions with unparalleled leadership, but also instilled a profound sense of identity and purpose within each of them. Many legions were renamed at this point, often adopting the name of their Primarch or a moniker reflecting their Primarch's personality or adopted homeworld. For instance, the Dazan Legion, originally the Warhounds, became the World Eaters under Angron. The Thru Legion, originally the Imperial Heralds, became the Ultramarines under Roboute Guilliman. This renaming symbolized a new chapter for each legion, solidifying their unique identities and cementing the bond between father and son, Primarch and legion, a bond that would prove to be both a source of immense strength and, ultimately, a tragic weakness. The Primarchs, now united with their legions, became the spearhead of the Great Crusade, their individual strengths and strategies contributing to the rapid expansion of the Imperium across the galaxy. The Emperor, having witnessed the devastating effectiveness of his genetically engineered sons, the Primarchs, unleashed them and their Legion Astartes, the Space Marines, upon the galaxy. This marked the true beginning of the Great Crusade in the early 31st millennium, a period of unprecedented expansion for the nascent Imperium of man. Across countless star systems, human worlds, isolated for millennia by the Age of Strife, were either brought into the imperial fold through diplomacy, their populations eagerly embracing the vision of a unified humanity, or, more often, through brutal conquest. Those who resisted the Emperor's truth, whether human tyrants or Xenos overlords, faced the overwhelming might of the Legion as Astartes. Entire civilizations were folded into the Imperium's burgeoning territories, their resources and populations now dedicated to the grand project of galactic unification. The sheer scale of this undertaking was staggering, as fleets of warships and legions of space marines pushed ever outward, reclaiming lost human colonies and purging alien threats. A pivotal moment in this early phase of the Great Crusade was the ENTIRE Crusade, a massive and protracted campaign against the largest orc empire ever encountered by humanity. Led by the colossal war boss Urlach Uruk, this greenskin empire, known for its sheer brutality and seemingly endless numbers, had ravaged vast swaths of the galaxy. The ENTIRE Crusade was not merely a battle, but a war of annihilation, requiring the combined might of 9 Space Marine legions led by the Emperor himself. The conflict culminated in the legendary Battle of ENTIRE, a titanic clash where the Emperor personally confronted and defeated Urlach Uruk in single combat, shattering the Orc Empire and securing a decisive, if hard-won, Imperial victory. The scale of this triumph was so immense that it was celebrated with a grand triumph on ENTIRE, a spectacle of Imperial might and glory that would forever be etched into the annals of history. In the aftermath of ENTIRE, the Emperor, recognizing the need for a single overarching commander to direct the increasingly complex and widespread military operations of the Great Crusade, made a momentous decision. He declared his most beloved son, Horus Lupercal, Primarch of the Luna Wolves Legion, as War Master. This unprecedented appointment granted Horus supreme command over all Imperial military forces, effectively making him the Emperor's proxy and the ultimate arbiter of the Crusade's direction. The other Primarchs, while possessing immense power and authority within their own legions, were now subordinate to Horus, a decision that, while seemingly logical at the time, would sow the seeds of future discord. With Horus at the helm, the Great Crusade continued its relentless expansion. Xenos threats, from parasitic Crude to the enigmatic Eldar, were largely purged or driven to the fringes of the galaxy. Humanity, under the iron fist of the Imperium, was rapidly becoming the dominant species, its dominion extending across vast swathes of the Milky Way. This era saw the brutal extermination of countless alien species, deemed either too dangerous to coexist with humanity or simply obstacles to the Emperor's grand vision of a human-dominated galaxy. The mantra of no pity, no remorse, no fear became the guiding principle for the Space Marines as they carved out the Imperium with fire and sword. However, not all Xenos encounters were easily resolved. The Rangdan Xenocides, a series of devastating wars against a highly advanced and aggressive Xenospecies known as the Rangda, pushed the Imperium to its absolute limits. These aliens, possessing terrifying bioweapons and mastery of warp technology, inflicted crippling losses upon the Great Crusade. Entire Space Marine legions were decimated, and the Imperium was forced to commit unprecedented resources to defeat this existential threat. The Rangdan Xenocides were a brutal reminder that even with the might of the Primarchs and their legions, the galaxy remained a perilous place, teeming with dangers that could challenge even the Emperor's grand design. The scars of these wars would linger for centuries, a testament to the ferocity of the Rangda and the immense cost of their defeat. Amidst these galactic struggles, a subtle but significant internal conflict began to brew. Lorgar Aurelian, the deeply spiritual and charismatic Primarch of the Wordbearers Legion, had, in his fervent devotion to his father, begun to promote the worship of the Emperor as a divine being. On the world of Monarchia, a shining example of his legion's cultural and spiritual influence, Lorgar had constructed magnificent temples and monuments dedicated to the Emperor, fostering a deeply religious society. However, the Emperor, a staunch atheist who vehemently rejected any form of worship, saw this as a dangerous deviation from his secular vision for humanity. He believed that religious dogma had been a primary cause of humanity's suffering during the Age of Strife and sought to eradicate it. In a public and humiliating chastisement, the Emperor ordered the Ultramarines under Robute Guilliman to raze Monarchia to the ground, a devastating blow to Lorgar's pride and faith. This act, intended to correct Lorgar's perceived error, instead ignited a deep resentment within the Primarch, making him vulnerable to darker influences. Following the ENTIRE triumph and the appointment of Horus as War Master, the Emperor, having laid the groundwork for his galactic empire, made a pivotal decision. He returned to Terra, the cradle of humanity, entrusting the continuation of the Great Crusade to Horus and the other Primarchs. This move, while seemingly a logical delegation of authority, was met with mixed reactions among the Primarchs. Some, like Robate Guilliman, embraced their expanded responsibilities, while others, like Perturabo, felt abandoned and undervalued. The Emperor's reasons for his return were profound and far-reaching. Upon his return, the Emperor immediately began work on a monumental project, the Golden Throne. This immense psychic device, a marvel of ancient technology and nascent Imperial engineering, was intended to safeguard the human Webway project. The Webway, an ancient network of extra-dimensional tunnels created by the Eldar, allowed for instantaneous travel across vast interstellar distances, bypassing the treacherous and demon-haunted realm of the Warp. The Emperor envisioned a human-controlled Webway, a safe and reliable means of galactic travel and communication that would free humanity from the perils of warp travel and the insidious influence of chaos. The Golden Throne, as the central nexus and power source for this ambitious undertaking, was designed to stabilize the human-engineered sections of the Webway and protect them from the predations of the Warp. The Emperor initiated the Webway project with a fervent hope that it would usher in a new golden age for humanity, one free from the existential threats posed by the Warp. He believed that by mastering the Webway, humanity could finally transcend its reliance on unpredictable warp jumps, which often led to lost ships, temporal distortions, and the ever-present danger of demon incursions. This project, shrouded in secrecy and known only to a select few, represented the Emperor's ultimate long-term strategy for humanity's survival and prosperity. To oversee the vast and increasingly complex imperial bureaucracy and to manage the intricate details of the Webway project, the Emperor relied heavily on his most trusted advisor, Malcador the Sigillite. Malcador, a powerful psyker and a figure of immense wisdom and loyalty, remained on Terra, acting as the Emperor's regent and the true administrative head of the nascent Imperium. His role was crucial, as he navigated the political machinations of the nascent imperial court and ensured the smooth functioning of the Emperor's grand designs while the Primarchs waged war across the stars. As the Great Crusade continued its relentless expansion, it encountered a myriad of human civilizations that had developed independently during the Age of Strife. One such encounter, tragically, proved to be a turning point. The Intirex, a highly advanced and peaceful human civilization, had flourished in isolation, developing a sophisticated society based on reason, logic, and a deep understanding of Xenos cultures, even maintaining peaceful relations with some. Their technology rivaled, and in some areas surpassed, that of the Imperium. When the Luna Wolves under Horus encountered the Intirex, there was an initial period of cautious diplomacy. However, due to misunderstandings and the insidious meddling of agents of chaos, a series of events unfolded that led to catastrophic conflict. A Xenos artifact, secretly stolen by the Sons of Horus under the influence of Erebus, a chaplain of the Wordbearers who had already fallen to chaos, was blamed on the Intirex. This act of treachery, combined with the Imperium's inherent distrust of Xenos and the Intirex's inability to comprehend the Imperium's aggressive expansionism, led to open warfare. Despite their advanced technology, the Intirex were ultimately no match for the brutal efficiency of the Space Marines. Their civilization was tragically destroyed, a stark example of the Imperium's uncompromising nature and the devastating consequences of misunderstanding and manipulation. This loss was a profound blow, not only for the Intirex, but for the potential of a more nuanced and tolerant future for humanity. The stage was now set for the ultimate betrayal. Horus Lupercal, the Emperor's most beloved son and the newly appointed War Master, was subtly corrupted by the insidious forces of chaos on the moon of Davin. During a campaign against a primitive, chaos-worshipping civilization, Horus sustained a grievous wound from a poisoned blade. His life hung in the balance, and his loyal Astartes sought any means to save him. It was then that the insidious Erebus, a chaplain of the Wordbearers who had already fallen to chaos and had been subtly manipulating Horus for some time, convinced the Luna Wolves to take Horus to a temple of the Serpent Lodge on Davin, a place deeply steeped in warp energies and forbidden rituals. There, through dark rituals and the manipulation of Horus's weakened state, the Chaos Gods, primarily Nurgle and Slanesh, began to whisper their insidious promises to him. They exploited his growing resentment of the Emperor's secrecy, his perceived abandonment, and the Emperor's perceived slight against his brothers, particularly Lorgar. They twisted his ambition, convincing him that the Emperor intended to become a god, and that only Horus could save humanity from such a tyrannical fate. The corruption was gradual, a slow poisoning of his mind and soul, but it was absolute. This pivotal moment on Davin marked the irreversible turning point, setting the stage for the Horus Heresy, the galaxy-spanning civil war that would tear the Imperium apart and bring an end to the glorious yet ultimately flawed Great Crusade. The dream of a unified, secular humanity forged in the fires of conquest was about to shatter into a million pieces, ushering in an age of darkness that would last for 10 millennia. We now move into the 31st millennium, a period that would forever scar the Imperium and shape the grim darkness of the future. The Great Crusade, a monumental undertaking to reunite long-lost human worlds under the banner of the Emperor of Mankind, had been raging for 2 centuries. This era of galactic expansion, fueled by the genetically engineered super soldiers known as Space Marines and led by their Primarch demigod generals, saw humanity reclaim countless systems from alien empires and human warlords. The Emperor, a being of unparalleled psychic might and strategic genius, envisioned a unified, enlightened humanity, free from superstition and fear. His ambition was boundless, his vision absolute. As the Crusade progressed, the Emperor, recognizing the need for a single, overarching commander to direct the vast fleets and legions, bestowed the title of War Master upon his most beloved and capable son, Horus Lupercal, Primarch of the Luna Wolves Legion. Horus, charismatic and brilliant, was seen by many as the natural successor to his father, a paragon of the Emperor's ideals. His appointment was met with widespread approval, a symbol of the Imperium's unstoppable momentum. However, beneath the veneer of triumph, insidious forces were already at work, sowing the seeds of discord and betrayal. One of the earliest and most pivotal turns towards darkness involved the Primarch Lorgar Aurelian and his Wordbearers Legion. Lorgar, unlike his more pragmatic brothers, harbored a deep spiritual yearning. He sought to imbue the Emperor's secular vision with a sense of divine purpose, to make the Emperor a god. This devotion, however, was in direct conflict with the Emperor's staunchly atheistic stance. The Emperor, who had witnessed firsthand the devastating consequences of religious fanaticism throughout human history, had explicitly forbidden the worship of any deity, including himself. Lorgar's fervent proselytizing, his construction of temples and monuments to the Emperor, was a direct affront to this decree. The breaking point arrived with the raising of Monarchia, a world meticulously converted by the Wordbearers into a monument to the Emperor's divinity. The Emperor, in a brutal display of his displeasure, ordered the Ultramarines under Roboute Guilliman to publicly censure and humiliate Lorgar and his legion. Their grand city, the Perfect City, was reduced to ashes before Lorgar's eyes. This act, intended to curb Lorgar's religious zeal, instead shattered his faith in his father. Feeling betrayed and utterly lost, Lorgar turned his spiritual hunger elsewhere, finding solace and a new purpose in the whispers of primordial entities known as Chaos. These malevolent, trans-dimensional beings, born from the collective emotions and psychic energies of sentient life, promised Lorgar the spiritual truth he so desperately craved. The Word-Bearers, under Lorgar's guidance, secretly began to worship the Chaos Gods, becoming the first of the Space Marine legions to fully succumb to their corrupting influence. Playing a crucial role in this descent was Erebus, first chaplain of the Word-Bearers. A cunning and manipulative figure, Erebus was already deeply entrenched in the worship of chaos, having encountered its insidious allure long before Lorgar's disillusionment. He became Lorgar's chief confidant and spiritual guide, subtly steering his Primarch towards the dark powers. Recognizing the immense potential in Horus, the newly appointed War Master, Erebus began to cultivate a relationship with him, carefully planting seeds of doubt about the Emperor's true intentions. He subtly questioned the Emperor's decision to withdraw from the Great Crusade and return to Terra to work on a secret project, the Webway Project, suggesting that the Emperor was hoarding power and knowledge for himself, abandoning his sons to fight a war he no longer cared for. Erebus's insidious whispers preyed on Horus's pride and nascent insecurities, subtly twisting his perception of his father and the Imperium. The true turning point for Horus, however, came during a campaign on the moon of Davin. While battling a Xeno species known as the Intirex, Horus was gravely wounded by a Kynabrak anatheme, a Xenos blade imbued with powerful warp energies. The wound was not merely physical, it was spiritual, poisoning his very soul. Erebus, ever present and opportunistic, orchestrated Horus's transfer to a Serpent Lodge temple on Davin, a place secretly dedicated to the worship of chaos. There, under the guise of healing, Erebus and the Davinite priests performed a dark ritual, exposing Horus to the full, unadulterated power of chaos. Through visions and psychic manipulation, they showed Horus a distorted future, a future where the Emperor, having completed his Webway project, would become a tyrannical god emperor, casting aside his Primarchs and ruling humanity with an iron fist. They convinced Horus that the Emperor intended to ascend to godhood, leaving his sons to wither and die, their purpose served. This twisted prophecy, combined with the psychic torment of his wound and the insidious influence of chaos, completely broke Horus's will. He succumbed, embracing the dark powers and pledging his allegiance to them, believing he was saving humanity from the Emperor's perceived tyranny. He became the instrument of chaos, the spearhead of their ambition to corrupt and destroy the Imperium. With Horus fully corrupted, the stage was set for the grand betrayal. His first target for recruitment into the ranks of chaos was his brother, Fulgrim, the elegant and artistic Primarch of the Emperor's Children Legion. Fulgrim, known for his relentless pursuit of perfection and aesthetic beauty, had already begun to dabble in forbidden arts and hedonistic excesses, subtly influenced by the whispers of the chaos god Slanesh, the Prince of Pleasure. Horus, exploiting Fulgrim's vanity and his desire for ultimate perfection, presented him with a distorted narrative of the Emperor's betrayal. He convinced Fulgrim that the Emperor was holding humanity back, stifling its potential for true greatness and sublime experience. He offered Fulgrim a path to transcendence, a liberation from the Emperor's restrictive dogma, promising him unparalleled beauty, sensation, and power through the worship of Slanesh. Fulgrim, already teetering on the edge of corruption, readily embraced this offer, leading his entire legion into the service of the Dark Prince. The Emperor's children, once paragons of discipline and artistry, descended into depravity and excess, their pursuit of perfection twisting into a grotesque obsession with pain and pleasure. Next, Horus turned his attention to Angron, the tormented Primarch of the World Eaters Legion. Angron's tragic past on his homeworld of Nuceria had seen him forcibly implanted with cruel psychosurgical devices known as the Butcher's Nails. These implants, designed to enhance aggression and suppress pain, constantly fed Angron's rage, turning him into a living engine of destruction. The Emperor, despite his immense power, had been unable to remove the nails without killing Angron, a failure that deeply embittered the Primarch. Horus, understanding Angron's profound suffering and his resentment towards the Emperor for not saving him, manipulated these raw emotions. He offered Angron not a cure, but a release, a complete embrace of his rage through the worship of the Chaos God Khorne, the Blood God, deity of war, murder, and violence. Horus convinced Angron that by fully unleashing his fury, he would find true freedom and purpose. He encouraged the World Eaters to further enhance their Butcher's Nails, driving them into a perpetual frenzy of bloodlust. Angron, consumed by his inner demons and swayed by Horus's promises of unbridled warfare, gladly pledged his legion to Khorne, transforming the World Eaters into berserkers dedicated to slaughter. With 3 legions now firmly in his grasp, Horus began to consolidate his power and eliminate any potential threats within his own forces. He orchestrated the Istvan III atrocity, a horrific act of betrayal designed to purge loyalist elements from his own Luna Wolves, now renamed the Sons of Horus, the Emperor's Children, the World Eaters, and the Death Guard legions. Horus announced a new campaign, seemingly against a rebellious planetary governor on Istvan III. He deployed the loyalist companies of these legions, those who still held true to the Emperor, to the planet's surface. Once they were planetside, Horus ordered a devastating orbital bombardment, unleashing a deadly virus known as the Life Eater virus upon the unsuspecting loyalists. This chemical weapon rapidly consumed all organic life, turning the planet into a charnel house. However, a small contingent of loyalists, including Captain Garrow of the Death Guard and Captain Saul Tarvitz of the Emperor's Children, managed to survive the initial bombardment, taking refuge in underground bunkers. Enraged by their survival, Horus then ordered his corrupted legions to descend to the surface and systematically hunt down and exterminate the remaining loyalists in a brutal ground assault. This act of fratricide served to solidify Horus's control over his forces, ensuring that only those completely devoted to chaos remained. The galaxy, unknowingly, was on the precipice of a civil war unlike any it had ever witnessed. The Istvan III atrocity was merely a prelude to a far greater betrayal. 9 Space Marine legions, swayed by Horus's charisma, Erebus's machinations, and the insidious whispers of chaos, turned against the Imperium. These legions, now known as the Traitor Legions, included the sons of Horus, the Emperor's Children, the World Eaters, the Death Guard, the Word Bearers, the Iron Warriors, the Alpha Legion, the Night Lords, and the Thousand Sons. Their defection plunged the galaxy into a cataclysmic conflict, a war of brother against brother, a struggle for the very soul of humanity. The Loyalist forces, reeling from the shock of Istvan III, attempted to retaliate. A massive Loyalist fleet comprising elements of the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard legions was dispatched to Istvan V, where Horus and his traitor legions had gathered. This expedition, intended as a swift and decisive strike against the War Master, instead became one of the most devastating defeats for the Imperium, the Drop Site Massacre. The Loyalist forces, led by the Primarchs Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands, Vulcan of the Salamanders, and Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard, landed on Istvan V, expecting to engage only Horus's forces. However, Horus had anticipated their arrival and laid a cunning trap. As the Loyalists engaged the initial waves of traitor legions, a second wave of seemingly Loyalist forces comprised of the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and Word Bearers landed behind them, effectively encircling and ambushing the Loyalist legions. These legions, though secretly aligned with Horus, had maintained a facade of loyalty, allowing them to strike at the most opportune moment. The Loyalist forces, caught between two fronts, were utterly decimated. In the brutal melee of the Drop Site Massacre, one of the most tragic losses occurred: the death of Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands. Ferrus Manus, a formidable warrior known for his unyielding will and his cybernetic metallic hands, confronted his former brother, Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children. Their duel was a clash of titans, a visceral representation of the galaxy's fracturing. Despite his immense strength and skill, Ferrus Manus was ultimately overcome by Fulgrim, who, now fully corrupted by Slaanesh, fought with a depraved artistry. In a moment of horrific triumph, Fulgrim, wielding his demon-infused blade, decapitated Ferrus Manus, holding his severed head aloft as a trophy. This act not only deprived the Imperium of a powerful Primarch, but also served as a stark demonstration of the depths of depravity to which the traitor legions had fallen. The Iron Hands, witnessing the brutal murder of their father, were driven into a suicidal rage, fighting to the last man. The Salamanders and Raven Guard, though suffering catastrophic losses, managed to extract a few survivors, but the Loyalist forces at Istvan V were effectively broken. Meanwhile, one of the most powerful and numerous Loyalist legions, the Ultramarines, under the command of their pragmatic and brilliant Primarch, Rabaut Guilliman, found themselves tragically delayed and cut off from the main theater of war. The Ultramarines, based in the Ultramar sector, a vast empire of human worlds, were preparing to join the fight against Horus when a new and terrifying phenomenon erupted across the galaxy: the Ruin Storm. This immense, galaxy-spanning warp storm, deliberately engineered by the demon Primarch Lorgar and his word-bearers using ancient rituals and dark pacts with chaos, tore through the fabric of reality. The Ruin Storm made warp travel, the primary method of interstellar travel, incredibly treacherous and often impossible. It effectively isolated large swathes of the galaxy, including Ultramar, from Terra, the heart of the Imperium. Guilliman and his legion, desperate to reach Terra and defend the Emperor, found themselves trapped, forced to navigate the treacherous currents of the Ruin Storm, their path blocked and their communications severed. This strategic isolation of the Ultramarines, a cornerstone of the Loyalist forces, was a crucial victory for Horus, allowing him to consolidate his gains and press his advantage without fear of immediate intervention from one of the most powerful Loyalist legions. The galaxy was now truly engulfed in the flames of civil war, a conflict that would define the next 10 millennia. And so, in the maelstrom of M31, the galaxy continued its descent into unparalleled civil war. While the War Master's forces consolidated their gains, the Loyalist legions grappled with the unfolding tragedy. A pivotal moment, born of desperation and misguided loyalty, would soon accelerate the conflict. Magnus the Red, the crimson-skinned Primarch of the Thousand Sons, a legion renowned for its psychic prowess, had long been a controversial figure. Despite the Emperor's explicit decree against sorcery and unregulated psychic endeavors, Magnus, driven by a thirst for knowledge and a desire to avert catastrophe, attempted to warn his father of Horus's treachery. He did so not through conventional means, but by projecting his immense psychic might directly into the Imperial Palace on Terra, breaching the Emperor's carefully constructed psychic wards. This act, intended as a desperate plea, had disastrous consequences. The wards, designed to protect Terra from all psychic intrusion, shattered under the strain, inadvertently creating a pathway for demonic incursions and leaving the throne world vulnerable. The Emperor, already burdened by the burgeoning rebellion, perceived this as a direct act of defiance and a grave betrayal. The Emperor, perhaps in a moment of fury or strategic miscalculation, dispatched Leman Russ, the wolf-like Primarch of the Space Wolves, to Prospero, the homeworld of the Thousand Suns. The order was not to destroy, but to bring Magnus to Terra for judgment. However, the warp, the chaotic dimension that underpins reality, interfered with the message, twisting it into an order for extermination. Russ, ever the loyal but often brutal executor of the Emperor's will, descended upon Prospero with his legion, unleashing a devastating orbital bombardment and a ground assault. The ensuing battle was a tragedy of epic proportions, a loyalist legion destroying another loyalist legion, all due to a misunderstanding and the machinations of chaos. Prospero burned, its magnificent libraries and psychic academies reduced to ash, and the Thousand Suns, shattered and betrayed, were forced to flee into the Eye of Terror, their Primarch forever branded a traitor. This event, known as the Burning of Prospero, further fractured the Imperium and solidified Magnus's path into the arms of the Chaos God Tzeentch, the Changer of Ways. Meanwhile, far from the central theaters of war, other loyalist legions remained largely unaware of the full scale of the unfolding tragedy. The Lionel Johnson, the stoic and enigmatic Primarch of the Dark Angels, and his legion were engaged in extensive campaigns across the galaxy, battling Xenos threats and suppressing minor rebellions, as was their tradition. Their isolation, a consequence of their dispersed operational structure and the vastness of the galaxy, meant that news of Horus's betrayal and the subsequent civil war reached them piecemeal and often distorted. The Lion, ever suspicious and fiercely independent, struggled to reconcile the fragmented reports with his understanding of the Imperium. This delayed their entry into the main conflict, a factor that would have significant implications for the Loyalist cause. As the shadow of Horus's rebellion loomed larger, the remaining Loyalist Primarchs rallied to the defense of the Imperium. Sanguinius, the angelic Primarch of the Blood Angels, a legion known for its nobility and ferocity, emerged as a beacon of hope. With the Emperor engaged in his own mysterious work on Terra, Sanguinius, revered by his brothers and adored by the common soldiery, took up the mantle of supreme commander of the Loyalist forces defending the throne world. His presence inspired courage and resolve in the face of overwhelming odds. He was a strategic genius and a formidable warrior, capable of turning the tide of battle with his personal intervention. His leadership during this period was crucial in organizing the disparate Loyalist elements and preparing for the inevitable assault. Simultaneously, Rogel Dorn, the stoic and unyielding Primarch of the Imperial Fists, the Emperor's Praetorians and Master Builders, dedicated his unparalleled expertise to fortifying the solar system. Knowing that Terra was the ultimate prize, Dorn oversaw the construction of an intricate network of orbital defenses, planetary strongholds, and void shields, transforming the entire system into an impregnable fortress. He poured his strategic genius and the tireless efforts of his legion into creating a defense that he believed even Horus could not breach. Every asteroid was weaponized, every moon a bastion, and Terra itself became a labyrinth of interconnected bastions and bunkers, culminating in the colossal Imperial Palace, a fortress of unimaginable scale and resilience. Dorn understood that the fate of humanity rested on his shoulders, and he would not fail. With the Loyalist defenses prepared, the inevitable advance of the War Master's forces began. The traitor legions, now fully committed to chaos, began their inexorable march towards Terra. The Sons of Horus, led by their corrupted Primarch, formed the vanguard, their once proud banners now emblazoned with the Eye of Horus. Alongside them came the World Eaters, a legion of berserkers driven to bloodlust by their Primarch Angron and the Chaos God Khorne, leaving a trail of carnage in their wake. The Emperor's children, once paragons of perfection, now indulged in every excess imaginable under the influence of Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, their war cries a cacophony of depraved ecstasy. And the Death Guard, transformed into rotting, plague-ridden monstrosities by Nurgle, the Plague Lord, advanced with a grim, unstoppable resilience, spreading despair and contagion wherever they went. These, among others, formed the spearhead of Horus's invasion, a vast armada of corrupted warships and countless legions of traitors, all bent on the destruction of the Imperium. The heresy culminated in the epic and devastating siege of Terra, a conflict that would forever scar the galaxy. For months, the forces of Horus battered against Dorn's meticulously crafted defenses. Millions died on both sides, the solar system becoming a charnel house. The void battles were titanic, the ground engagements apocalyptic. The Imperial Palace, the very heart of the Imperium, became the focal point of the fighting, its colossal walls and bastions enduring relentless bombardment and wave after wave of traitor assaults. The Loyalists, though outnumbered and outgunned, fought with a desperate courage, knowing that the survival of humanity depended on their defiance. Sanguinius was everywhere, inspiring his troops, leading charges, and personally slaying countless foes. Dorn, from his command center, directed the defense with unyielding resolve, his tactical brilliance holding the line against impossible odds. As the siege dragged on, and the Loyalist forces began to falter under the sheer weight of the traitor assault, Horus made a bold, audacious move. He lowered the shields of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, a colossal vessel that dwarfed all others. This act was a direct challenge, a taunt to the Emperor, daring him to confront his rebellious son. It was a gamble, but one born of Horus's arrogance and his belief in his own invincibility, now further amplified by the power of chaos. He knew that the Emperor, despite his immense power, was bound by a sense of duty and a desire to end the war swiftly, to spare humanity further suffering. The Emperor, recognizing the challenge and seeing an opportunity to strike a decisive blow, accepted. Accompanied by Sanguinius, the only Primarch capable of matching his speed and skill in close quarters, and Rogel Dorn, whose tactical mind and unwavering loyalty were indispensable, the Emperor teleported aboard the Vengeful Spirit. This was a desperate gambit, a direct assault on the War Master's command vessel, a winner-take-all confrontation that would decide the fate of the Imperium. Upon boarding the Vengeful Spirit, the Loyalist champions were immediately separated by the chaotic energies and demonic forces infesting the ship. Sanguinius, ever the noble and courageous warrior, was the first to confront Horus. What transpired between them is shrouded in myth and legend, but it is known that Sanguinius, despite being grievously wounded, fought with unparalleled ferocity. He knew he could not defeat Horus, empowered as he was by the four Chaos Gods, but he hoped to create an opening, a momentary weakness, for the Emperor. In a final, desperate act of self-sacrifice, Sanguinius attacked Horus, managing to inflict a small but significant wound before being brutally slain by his corrupted brother. His death, a profound tragedy for the Imperium, created a flicker of vulnerability in Horus's otherwise impenetrable defenses, a moment of doubt or pain that the Emperor could exploit. It was then that the Emperor confronted Horus aboard his flagship. The final battle between father and son, between the architect of the Imperium and his most beloved creation, was a cataclysmic clash of titanic powers. The Emperor, wielding his psychic might and his legendary blade, fought with a fury born of betrayal and sorrow. Horus, empowered by the full might of the Chaos Gods, was a monstrous figure, a godlike entity of pure malevolence. The battle raged, tearing apart the very fabric of reality within the Vengeful Spirit. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, a cosmic struggle between order and chaos. Ultimately, the Emperor, drawing upon a reserve of power he had never before unleashed, managed to defeat Horus. He struck a final, devastating blow, utterly obliterating the War Master's soul and body, ending his rebellion forever. However, the victory came at an unbearable cost. Horus, in his dying moments, had inflicted a mortal wound upon the Emperor. His physical form shattered, his life force ebbing away, the Emperor was brought back to Terra by Rogel Dorn. In a desperate attempt to preserve his life and his psychic presence, the Emperor was interred upon the Golden Throne, an ancient Xenos device that sustained his broken body and allowed him to project his psychic will across the galaxy, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. He became the living corpse, the undying Emperor forever bound to his throne, his silent vigil maintaining the Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse that allowed interstellar travel and holding back the tides of chaos. With their War Master defeated and their patron gods seemingly abandoning them in the face of the Emperor's fury, the traitor legions, leaderless and broken, fled. They retreated into the Eye of Terror, a vast, swirling maelstrom of warp energy in the Segmentum Obscurus, a region of space where the veil between reality and the warp is thin. This hellish dimension became their sanctuary and their prison, a place where time and space are warped and demons run rampant. From this chaotic refuge, they would continue to plague the Imperium for millennia to come, their hatred undimmed. The Imperium, though victorious, was left utterly shattered. Its golden age was over, replaced by an era of grim darkness. The betrayal of Horus had irrevocably changed humanity's destiny, ushering in an age of superstition, xenophobia, and endless war. A galaxy forever scarred by the ultimate civil war. The dream of a unified, enlightened humanity died with the Emperor's internment, replaced by a brutal, theocratic empire fighting for its very survival. Following the devastating conclusion of the Horus Heresy, the Imperium found itself on the precipice of a new, uncertain era. As the 31st millennium dawned, the loyalist Space Marine legions, battered but unbowed, began the grim task of hunting down the remnants of the traitor forces. This period, known as the Scouring, was a brutal and relentless campaign, a desperate attempt to purge the galaxy of those who had betrayed humanity. The loyalist forces, led by figures like Rogel Dorn of the Imperial Fists and Jagratai Khan of the White Scars, pursued the fleeing traitors across countless star systems. Worlds that had sided with Horus were brought to heel, their populations often subjected to brutal purges to eradicate any lingering taint of heresy. The pursuit was relentless, driving the shattered remnants of the Sons of Horus, the Iron Warriors, the Word-Bearers, and the other traitor legions ever further into the galactic north, until they eventually sought refuge within the tumultuous, reality-warping maelstrom known as the Eye of Terror. This vast region of warped space, a scar on the galaxy left by the birth of Slanesh, the chaos god of excess, offered a sanctuary of sorts to the traitors, a place where the laws of physics and sanity were bent and broken, and where the demonic powers they served held sway. The Scouring, while successful in driving the immediate threat from Imperial space, inadvertently created a festering wound in the galaxy, a permanent haven for the forces of chaos that would plague humanity for millennia to come. In the immediate aftermath of the heresy, with the Emperor interred on the Golden Throne and the Imperium in disarray, the burden of leadership fell largely upon the shoulders of Roboute Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines. A master strategist, administrator, and statesman, Guilliman was appointed Lord Commander of the Imperium, a position of unparalleled authority. Recognizing the catastrophic consequences of allowing single individuals, even primarchs, to wield such immense power and acutely aware of how the vast legions themselves had been turned against the Imperium, Guilliman embarked on a monumental task, the reorganization of the Space Marine Legions. His magnum opus, the Codex Astartes, was a tome of military doctrine and organizational principles intended to prevent any future rebellion on the scale of the heresy. The core tenet of the Codex was the breaking down of the massive legions, which could number in the hundreds of thousands, into smaller, more manageable units known as chapters. Each chapter was to consist of approximately 1,000 Space Marines, a force large enough to be effective but small enough to be controlled and prevented from becoming a power unto itself. This restructuring was met with considerable resistance, particularly from primarchs like Rogel Dorn, who saw it as a weakening of the Imperium's military might and a betrayal of the Emperor's original vision. However, Guilliman, with his characteristic pragmatism and unwavering loyalty, ultimately prevailed, arguing that the long-term stability of the Imperium depended on these reforms. The Space Marine Legions, once the spearhead of the Great Crusade, were thus fractured, their brotherhoods divided, and their individual identities reforged as independent chapters, each with its own traditions, heraldry, and homeworld. This fundamental shift in military organization would define the Space Marines for the next 10,000 years, ensuring their continued loyalty to the Imperium, even as it sometimes hindered their ability to wage large-scale campaigns. Simultaneously, as the Imperium grappled with the internal wounds of the heresy, a new, shadowy organization began to take shape, the Inquisition. Born from the crucible of betrayal and the ever-present threat of chaos, the Inquisition was established as an overarching, extra-legal body with immense power and authority, answerable only to itself and ultimately to the Emperor's will. Its mandate was clear: to root out heresy, Xenos influence, and demonic corruption wherever it might fester within the Imperium. Inquisitors, operating with absolute authority, could commandeer resources, interrogate anyone, and even declare entire planets exterminatus, a decree to cleanse a world of all life if the threat was deemed too great. This new institution, born of necessity, quickly became a pervasive and often terrifying force, its agents operating in secrecy, their methods often brutal, but their purpose resolute. The Inquisition was divided into various ordos, each specializing in a particular threat. The Ordo Hereticus hunted down internal enemies, cults, and rogue psychers. The Ordo Xenos dealt with alien threats, from insidious infiltrators to open invasions. And the Ordo Malleus, the Demon Hunters, was dedicated to combating the most insidious and terrifying threat of all, the forces of chaos and their demonic servants. The establishment of the Inquisition marked a profound shift in the Imperium's governance, reflecting a deep-seated paranoia and a willingness to employ extreme measures to preserve humanity, even at the cost of individual liberties or justice. With the Emperor interred on the Golden Throne, his physical form sustained by ancient technology, and the psychic sacrifices of thousands of psychers, the day-to-day governance of the Imperium fell to a new ruling body, the High Lords of Terra. This council, composed of the most powerful and influential individuals from the Imperium's various institutions, became the de facto rulers of humanity. Each High Lord represented a specific administrative or military branch, such as the Fabricator General of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Grand Master of the Administratum, or the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes. Their collective decisions, often fraught with political intrigue and bureaucratic infighting, guided the vast and sprawling Imperium. The Golden Throne itself, a marvel of archaeotech and psychic engineering, became the symbolic heart of the Imperium, a sacred relic upon which the Emperor, though inert, continued to project his psychic light, guiding astropathic communication and protecting humanity from the horrors of the warp. His physical presence, however, was gone, replaced by the crushing weight of bureaucratic tradition and the often stifling influence of the High Lords. As the centuries turned into millennia, a profound ideological shift began to take hold within the Imperium. What had once been the Emperor's secular vision for humanity, a realm of reason and scientific advancement, slowly transformed into a fervent dogmatic religion. The imperial cult, initially a localized phenomenon, grew in power and influence, eventually becoming the dominant faith across the entire Imperium. The Emperor, who had explicitly forbidden religious worship, was now revered as a god, a divine savior who had sacrificed himself for humanity. This transformation was largely orchestrated and propagated by the Ecclesiarchy, a vast and powerful institution dedicated to the worship of the god Emperor. The Ecclesiarchy, with its countless priests, missionaries, and fervent followers, spread its dogma to every corner of the Imperium, establishing churches, cathedrals, and shrines on countless worlds. Heresy, once defined as rebellion against the Emperor's rule, now encompassed any deviation from the tenets of the imperial cult. The Ecclesiarchy's rise to power was a pivotal moment, cementing a spiritual foundation for the Imperium that would endure for 10,000 years, but also ushering in an era of religious fanaticism and intolerance. This religious fervor, coupled with the trauma of the heresy and the Emperor's incapacitation, had a profound and detrimental effect on technological innovation. The pursuit of new knowledge, once a driving force of the Great Crusade, largely ceased. Instead, dogma, ritual, and a deep-seated fear of new discoveries replaced scientific inquiry. Existing technologies, many of them ancient and imperfectly understood, were treated with reverence, their operation often shrouded in arcane rituals and prayers rather than scientific principles. The concept of innovation became synonymous with heresy, as any deviation from established designs was seen as a dangerous departure from the Emperor's will, or a potential gateway for chaos. This led to a pervasive technological stagnation that would cripple the Imperium for millennia. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the cult of the machine god, maintained its near monopoly on technology, guarding its knowledge fiercely and resisting any attempts at change or independent research. Their vast forge worlds churned out weapons and machinery according to ancient STC, standard template construct designs, but true innovation was rare and often met with suspicion and even violence. The Mechanicus, with their bionic augmentations and inscrutable rituals, became the keepers of humanity's technological heritage, but also its unwitting jailers, ensuring that progress remained frozen in time. The initial momentum of the Great Crusade, the ambitious expansion and unification of humanity, was irrevocably lost. The Imperium, scarred by civil war and crippled by internal strife, shifted from an aggressive, expansionist power to a largely defensive one. Its vast military, though still formidable, was now primarily occupied with reacting to threats rather than proactively expanding its borders. The galaxy, once seemingly within humanity's grasp, became a dangerous and hostile place, teeming with Xenos empires, insidious chaos cults, and internal rebellions. The Imperium, once a beacon of hope and progress, became a besieged fortress, constantly fighting for its very survival. This defensive posture, born of necessity, further contributed to the stagnation, as resources and efforts were perpetually diverted to endless wars of attrition. Meanwhile, the Golden Throne, the life support system for the Emperor, slowly began to fail. The ancient technology, never fully understood even by the Mechanicus, required constant maintenance and, more grimly, the psychic sacrifice of thousands of psychers each day. These unfortunate souls, known as the Astral Choir, were fed to the Golden Throne, their psychic energy sustaining the Emperor's life force and, crucially, allowing him to project the Astronomicon. The Astronomicon was a psychic beacon, a guiding light that allowed starships to navigate the treacherous currents of the warp, making interstellar travel possible. As the millennia wore on, the Emperor's psychic light dimmed, a subtle but terrifying indication of the Golden Throne's slow decay. This looming catastrophe, a constant, unspoken threat, hung over the Imperium like a shroud, for without the Astronomicon, interstellar travel would become all but impossible, and the Imperium would fracture and collapse. Throughout these long millennia, the Imperium endured countless wars, a relentless struggle against a myriad of foes. Xenos empires such as the ravenous Tyranids, the enigmatic Eldar, the brutal Orcs, and the insidious Necrons constantly assailed its borders. Heretics, both internal and external, sought to undermine its authority, while demons, the malevolent entities of the warp, constantly clawed at the fabric of reality, seeking to corrupt and destroy. The Imperium often found itself fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously, its vast resources stretched thin, its armies constantly engaged in a desperate, unending struggle for survival. This constant state of war, while brutal, also served to reinforce the Imperium's grim, unyielding ethos, forging a society defined by sacrifice, duty, and an unwavering, if often blind, faith in the Emperor. One of the most devastating conflicts of this era was the Beast Arises, a massive orc Waaagh that erupted in the 32nd millennium. This was no ordinary orc invasion. It was led by a colossal war boss known simply as the Beast, an orc of unprecedented size, intelligence, and power, unlike anything the Imperium had ever encountered. The Beast's Waaagh was so immense, so coordinated, and so utterly destructive that it threatened to overwhelm the Imperium entirely. Entire sectors were ravaged, their populations annihilated, and Imperial fleets were shattered by the sheer ferocity of the orc onslaught. The scale of the threat was so great that it forced the Imperium to take unprecedented measures, even allowing the return of the Primarch Vulcan from his self-imposed exile to aid in the war effort. The Beast Arises was a truly existential crisis, a stark reminder of the galaxy's inherent hostility and the ever-present danger of annihilation. It was a war that pushed the Imperium to its absolute limits, demonstrating both its resilience and its profound vulnerabilities. The scars of this conflict would linger for centuries, a grim testament to the enduring threat of the orcs and the ever-present struggle for humanity's survival in a hostile galaxy. The Imperium, still reeling from the heresy and the subsequent scouring, faced a new internal cataclysm known as the War of the Beast. This devastating conflict, unfolding in the early 32nd millennium, saw the emergence of an unprecedented orc threat. Not mere Waaghs, but a unified, technologically advanced orc empire led by a single colossal war boss known simply as the Beast. This creature was of such immense size and psychic power that he dwarfed even the largest Space Marine dreadnoughts, and his forces wielded technology far beyond the crude scrap metal usually associated with orcs. The Beast Waaagh tore through the Imperium, annihilating entire star systems and threatening Terra itself. The scale of the invasion was so immense that it nearly shattered the already fragile unity of the Imperium. Several Space Marine chapters, the elite genetically engineered super soldiers of humanity, were all but wiped out in desperate holding actions. The Imperial Fists in particular suffered grievously, with their chapter master, Courland, taking on the mantle of Lord Commander Militant of the Imperium, a title not held since the Emperor's own direct command during the Great Crusade. Courland, a veteran of countless battles and a master strategist, rallied the scattered forces of humanity. He understood the existential threat posed by the Beast and made a series of increasingly desperate, yet ultimately necessary decisions. He authorized the creation of new Space Marine chapters, a process that had been strictly limited since the Heresy, and even sanctioned the development of highly experimental and dangerous weaponry. The High Lords of Terra, the council of powerful individuals who governed the Imperium in the Emperor's stead, were themselves decimated by the War of the Beast. Many were killed in direct attacks on Terra, their incompetence and infighting exposed by the sheer ferocity of the Orc onslaught. Courland, with grim determination, led the Imperium's forces in a series of brutal campaigns, pushing back against the seemingly endless Green Tide. His leadership was instrumental in preventing the total collapse of the Imperium. However, the ultimate victory came at a terrible price. In a final, desperate confrontation, Courland personally led a strike force deep into the Beast's flagship, a gargantuan space hulk that served as the Orc leader's mobile fortress. In a titanic struggle, Courland sacrificed himself, ultimately slaying the Beast and ending the immediate threat. His death, while heroic, left a vacuum of leadership that would further destabilize the Imperium. The War of the Beast, though won, left scars that would never truly heal, highlighting the Imperium's vulnerability and the ever-present threat of external enemies. Following the devastation of the War of the Beast, the Imperium, now in the mid-32nd millennium, stumbled into another period of profound internal strife, the Age of Apostasy. This era began with the rise of Goge Vandire, a man of immense ambition and terrifying fanaticism. He held the dual titles of High Lord of the Administratum, the vast bureaucracy responsible for the day-to-day running of the Imperium, and Ecclesiarch, the head of the Adeptus Ministorum, the official state religion of the Imperium. Vandire, through a combination of political maneuvering, intimidation, and outright murder, consolidated power, effectively becoming a tyrannical dictator. He exploited the widespread fear and uncertainty left by the War of the Beast, presenting himself as a divine instrument of the Emperor's will, destined to purge the Imperium of all perceived corruption and heresy. Vandire's reign of terror was characterized by extreme religious zealotry and brutal oppression. He instituted purges on an unprecedented scale, persecuting countless innocents under the guise of rooting out heresy. His personal guard, the Brides of the Emperor, later to become the Sisters of Battle, were fanatically devoted to him, carrying out his every command with ruthless efficiency. Worlds that resisted his dictates were subjected to orbital bombardment and their populations put to the sword. The Imperium, already weakened by centuries of conflict, was brought to the brink of civil war from within. Vandire's paranoia and megalomania grew unchecked, and his actions threatened to unravel the very fabric of imperial society. He amassed vast personal wealth and power, living in obscene luxury while billions suffered under his iron fist. His policies crippled interstellar trade, stifled scientific advancement, and fostered an atmosphere of constant fear and suspicion. The common people, desperate and downtrodden, began to whisper of rebellion, but the might of Vandire's forces seemed insurmountable. It was against this backdrop of tyranny and despair that Sebastian Thor emerged. A charismatic preacher from the agri-world of Dimamar, Thor preached a message of hope and defiance, challenging Vandire's authority and denouncing his excesses as blasphemous. His words resonated with the oppressed masses, and soon, a widespread rebellion began to coalesce around him. This uprising, fueled by righteous anger and a desperate desire for freedom, became known as the Reign of Blood. Thor's followers, though poorly equipped and largely untrained, were driven by an unshakable faith in the Emperor and a burning hatred for Vandire's regime. The conflict was brutal and protracted, with both sides committing unspeakable atrocities. Worlds were engulfed in civil war, and the Imperium's already strained resources were further depleted. The Adeptus Ministorum itself was fractured, with many priests openly defying Vandire and joining Thor's cause. The conflict raged for years, threatening to tear the Imperium apart completely. The turning point in the Age of Apostasy came when the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guard, and the silent watchers of the Imperial Palace finally broke their millennia-long silence. For centuries, they had remained within the confines of the palace, guarding the Golden Throne and the comatose Emperor, refusing to intervene in the Imperium's secular affairs. However, Vandire's escalating madness and the existential threat he posed to the Imperium proved too much even for their stoic resolve. Led by Captain General Trajan Valoris, the Custodes marched forth from the palace, a golden tide of righteous fury. They were joined by a contingent of the Brides of the Emperor, who, upon learning the truth of Vandire's corruption and the scale of his atrocities, turned against their former master. This act of defiance, spearheaded by the legendary Sister of Battle, Alicia Dominisa, was instrumental in ending Vandire's reign. Confronted by the Emperor's own guardians and deserted by his most fanatical followers, Vandire's power crumbled. He was ultimately executed, bringing an end to the Age of Apostasy, but not before inflicting irreparable damage upon the Imperium. The events of this era profoundly shaped the future of the Adeptus Ministorum, leading to significant reforms and the formal establishment of the Adepta Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle, as a distinct and powerful military arm of the Ecclesiarchy. Even after the end of Vandir's reign, the Imperium remained a fractured and volatile entity. The Age of Apostasy had exposed deep-seated divisions and weaknesses within its institutions. Internal strife continued to plague humanity, with various factions and planetary governors vying for power and resources. The constant threat of external enemies, both Xenos and Chaos, never abated. While the Imperium grappled with its internal demons, powerful alien races continued to pose a grave danger. The Eldar, an ancient and highly advanced Xenos race, continued their long, slow decline. Once masters of the galaxy, their empire had collapsed millennia ago in a catastrophic event known as the Fall, which birthed the Chaos god Slaanesh. Now, scattered and few in number, the Eldar often manipulated events from the shadows, using their precognitive abilities and advanced technology to subtly influence the course of galactic history. They sought to avert their own prophesied doom, a fate they believed was inextricably linked to the fate of the galaxy itself. Their motivations were often inscrutable to humanity, their actions appearing as random acts of aggression or inexplicable assistance, always serving their own enigmatic agenda. Simultaneously, another ancient and terrifying threat began to stir: the Necrons. These skeletal, self-aware machines, once the biological Necrontyr, had traded their flesh for immortality and power millennia ago, only to fall into a long slumber. Now, in the 38th and 39th millennia, they slowly began to awaken from their tomb worlds, their ancient protocols activating, compelling them to reclaim their long-lost empire. Their reemergence was piecemeal at first, isolated incidents of tomb worlds activating and annihilating unsuspecting imperial settlements. But as more and more Necron dynasties awoke, the true scale of their threat became apparent. Their advanced weaponry, self-repairing bodies, and implacable nature made them a terrifying foe, one that the Imperium, already stretched thin, was ill-equipped to confront. The Necrons represented a cold, calculating threat, devoid of emotion or mercy, driven solely by the desire to restore their ancient dominion. As if these myriad threats weren't enough, the Imperium faced an entirely new and utterly alien horror in the late 41st millennium: the Tyranids. This ravenous Xenos hive fleet, a vast migratory organism composed of countless bioforms, was first encountered on the eastern fringe of the galaxy. The initial contact was devastating. Entire worlds were consumed, their biomass devoured and assimilated by the Tyranids to fuel their relentless advance. Unlike other Xenos races, the Tyranids had no discernible motives beyond consumption and propagation. They were a biological plague, a force of nature that sought only to strip entire star systems bare of all life. Their psychic shadow in the warp, a disruptive field that accompanied their fleets, severed planets from the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that allowed interstellar travel and communication, isolating them and making them easy prey. The Tyranids posed an existential threat unlike any other, a truly alien horror that defied all understanding and offered no possibility of diplomacy or compromise. Throughout this period, the Imperium's vast bureaucracy, the Administratum, became increasingly inefficient and corrupt. The sheer scale of the Imperium, encompassing 1 million worlds, made effective governance a near impossible task. Layers upon layers of bureaucracy, compounded by centuries of accumulated dogma and tradition, stifled innovation and hindered effective decision-making. Corruption became endemic, with officials siphoning off resources, engaging in petty power struggles, and prioritizing personal gain over the well-being of the Imperium. This systemic inefficiency directly impacted the Imperium's ability to defend itself. As vital resources were misallocated, intelligence was ignored, and crucial orders were delayed or lost in the labyrinthine administrative channels. The once noble ideals of the Great Crusade were buried under mountains of paperwork and the self-serving machinations of countless petty tyrants. Finally, and perhaps most tragically, humanity's understanding of its own history and the Emperor's true intentions became increasingly distorted and mythologized. The passage of millennia, coupled with the deliberate suppression of information by the Adeptus Ministorum, transformed the Emperor from a brilliant scientist and philosopher into a divine, omnipotent deity. The Great Crusade, once a mission of enlightenment and unity, was reinterpreted as a holy war against heresy and Xenos. The true nature of chaos, the warp, and even humanity's own origins were obscured by dogma and superstition. The Emperor's original vision of a secular, rational humanity was replaced by a rigid, fanatical faith that demonized knowledge and punished dissent. This historical revisionism, while providing a unifying ideology for a fractured Imperium, ultimately hindered humanity's progress and understanding, trapping it in a cycle of fear, ignorance, and endless war, setting the stage for the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. As the 41st millennium, or M41, drew to a close, the galaxy teetered on the precipice of an unprecedented catastrophe. For 10 millennia, the Imperium of Man, a vast interstellar empire, had endured, but its foundations were now cracking under the relentless pressure of internal decay and external threats. The long, slow decline had reached a critical juncture, and the forces of chaos, the malevolent entities dwelling in the warp, a parallel dimension of psychic energy, were poised to deliver a devastating blow. This era, known as the Galactic Crisis, would witness an event so cataclysmic that it would forever alter the face of the galaxy. The the 13th Black Crusade, and the subsequent fall of Cadia. The architect of this impending doom was Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos. For 10,000 years, Abaddon, once the first captain of the Sons of Horus, later renamed the Black Legion, the favored legion of the War Master Horus during the Horus Heresy, had been a thorn in the Imperium's side. He had launched 12 previous Black Crusades, massive incursions from the Eye of Terror, a vast warp storm into Imperial space, each one a bloody testament to his hatred and ambition. Each had been repelled, but each had also chipped away at the Imperium's strength. The 13th Black Crusade, however, would be different. This was not merely another raid or localized conquest. This was a meticulously planned, galaxy-spanning assault designed to break the Imperium once and for all. Abaddon had spent centuries gathering his forces, forging alliances with various demon legions, the monstrous inhabitants of the Warp, and consolidating his control over the disparate warbands of Chaos Space Marines, the corrupted superhuman soldiers who had betrayed the Emperor during the Horus Heresy. His ultimate goal was the destruction of the Cadian Gate, a strategically vital star system that served as the primary choke point between the Eye of Terror and the rest of the galaxy. Abaddon's forces, a terrifying armada of warp-tainted vessels and demonically possessed warriors, began to converge on the Cadian Gate. The sheer scale of this invasion was unprecedented. The Black Legion, Abaddon's personal legion of Chaos Space Marines, formed the vanguard, their black power armor adorned with the Eye of Horus, striking fear into the hearts of all who beheld them. Alongside them came the legions of the demon primarchs, the corrupted sons of the Emperor who had sided with Horus, though their full might would be unleashed later. Lesser demon legions, manifestations of the Warp's raw malevolence, poured forth from the Eye of Terror, their grotesque forms and unholy powers a terrifying sight. Cultist hordes, billions strong, drawn from worlds corrupted by chaos, swelled the ranks, eager to offer their lives in service to the dark gods. The Cadian Gate, a network of star systems and fortified worlds, had always been the Imperium's shield against the Eye of Terror. Cadia itself, a fortress world, was the linchpin of this defense, its surface bristling with defensive emplacements, its orbit choked with orbital defense platforms, and its population trained from birth to fight. Leading the defense of Cadia was Lord Castellan Ursarkar Creed. A legend in his own time, Creed was a master strategist and tactician, renowned for his unwavering resolve and his uncanny ability to outmaneuver his opponents. He was the epitome of the Cadian shock troops, the elite soldiers of the Imperial Guard, the Imperium's vast human army. Creed, along with the Cadian High Command, had been preparing for this day for centuries. They knew that a Black Crusade was an inevitability, and they had dedicated their lives to ensuring Cadia would hold. The planet's defenses were meticulously planned, each trench and bunker placed with purpose, each gun battery aimed with precision. The Cadian system was a fortress, but even the strongest fortress can fall. The forces of chaos launched their assault on Cadia with a ferocity that defied description. Wave after wave of chaos, space marines, cultists, and demons crashed against the planet's defenses. The skies above Cadia became a maelstrom of fire and destruction as void battles raged between the Imperial Navy, the Imperium's space fleet, and Abaddon's warp-tainted armada. On the ground, the Cadian shock troops, supported by regiments from across the Imperium, fought with a grim determination born of desperation. Every inch of ground was contested, every bunker a scene of unimaginable carnage. The air was thick with the stench of blood, ozone, and the unholy emanations of the warp. The fortress world, a vital bulwark against the Eye of Terror, was being torn apart. As the battle raged, reinforcements began to arrive. The Imperial Navy, though stretched thin across the galaxy, diverted every available vessel to Cadia. Space Marine chapters, the genetically engineered superhuman warriors who served as the Emperor's finest, answered the call. Among them were the Ultramarines, one of the most famous and well-disciplined chapters known for their adherence to the Codex Astartes, a tome of tactical and strategic wisdom. Their blue-armored warriors, led by their chapter master Marneus Calgar, fought with their characteristic precision and ferocity. The Dark Angels, another ancient and secretive chapter, also arrived, their green power armor a familiar sight on the battlefields of the Imperium. Other chapters, too numerous to mention, sent their warriors, each contributing their unique skills and traditions to the desperate defense. The arrival of these elite forces provided a much-needed boost to the morale of the defenders, but the sheer scale of the Chaos invasion meant that even these legendary warriors were fighting a desperate holding action. The battle for Cadia was not just a conventional war, it was a desperate struggle to protect the Cadian pylons. These ancient, monolithic structures scattered across the planet's surface were a mystery even to the Imperium's most learned scholars. What was known was that they somehow dampened the influence of the warp, acting as a psychic barrier that contained the Eye of Terror. If the pylons were destroyed, the Eye of Terror would expand, unleashing its full horror upon the galaxy. Chaos, understanding the strategic importance of these structures, focused its efforts on their destruction. Abaddon knew that simply conquering Cadia was not enough. He needed to shatter the pylon network to achieve his true objective. The fighting around the pylons was particularly brutal, with both sides pouring vast resources into their defense and destruction. Casualties mounted on both sides at an alarming rate, the ground around the pylons becoming a charnel house. In a truly unexpected turn of events, a new player entered the fray. Trazane the Infinite, a Necron overlord, arrived on Cadia. The Necrons, an ancient race of skeletal, self-aware machines, had once ruled the galaxy before their long slumber. Trazane, an eccentric and obsessive collector, was renowned for his vast personal museum, which contained countless artifacts and even living beings preserved in stasis. He arrived not to conquer or destroy, but to aid in the defense of Cadia, not out of any love for the Imperium, but out of a desire to preserve a truly significant historical event for his collection. He deployed his unique collection of historical figures, including ancient warriors and even a clone of a famous Imperial hero, to fight alongside the Imperials. His motives were purely selfish, driven by his insatiable desire to witness and collect history, but his intervention, however bizarre, provided a much-needed distraction and, in some cases, genuinely effective assistance against the Chaos forces. The sight of Necron warriors, ancient robotic constructs, fighting alongside Imperial guardsmen and Space Marines against the forces of Chaos was a surreal and unprecedented spectacle. Further bolstering Cadia's defenses, another legendary asset arrived, the Phalanx. This colossal space station, a mobile fortress monastery, was the ancient and venerable stronghold of the Imperial Fist's Space Marine chapter. A relic from the age of technology, the Phalanx was a star-spanning bastion of adamantium and ceramite, bristling with enough firepower to lay waste to entire fleets. Its arrival in orbit above Cadia was a sight that inspired awe and dread in equal measure. For the Imperial defenders, it was a symbol of hope and a testament to the Imperium's enduring might. For the forces of Chaos, it was a formidable obstacle, a testament to the sheer scale of the resistance they faced. The Phalanx immediately engaged Abaddon's fleet, its massive weapons tearing through Chaos vessels and providing vital air support for the beleaguered planetary defenders. Despite the heroic efforts of the defenders and the unexpected aid from Trazyn and the Phalanx, Abaddon had one more devastating card to play. He unleashed the Planet Killer, his personal flagship. This monstrous vessel was a testament to the destructive power of Chaos, its primary weapon capable of annihilating entire worlds. Abaddon directed its devastating firepower towards Cadia, specifically targeting the remaining pylon network. The Planet Killer's bombardments were unlike anything the defenders had ever witnessed, each blast capable of tearing vast craters in the planet's surface and shattering even the most hardened fortifications. The sheer destructive force of the Planet Killer was designed not just to destroy the pylons, but to break the will of the defenders, to show them the futility of their resistance. In the final, desperate stages of the battle, as Cadia crumbled under the relentless assault, Lord Castellan Ursarkar Creed, the unwavering leader of the Cadian defense, was captured by Abaddon himself. The exact circumstances of his capture remain shrouded in grim legend, but it was a devastating blow to the morale of the remaining defenders. The loss of their iconic leader, the man who had embodied Cadia's defiance, signaled the beginning of the end. Cadia fell. The Cadian pylon network, shattered by the Planet Killer's bombardments and the relentless assaults of Chaos, collapsed. With the psychic barrier gone, the Eye of Terror, a vast warp storm that had festered at the edge of the galaxy for 10 millennia, surged outwards. The galaxy was ripped open as the Great Rift, a colossal tear in reality, tore across the stars. This cataclysmic event, also known as the Cicatrix Maledictum, split the Imperium in two, plunging vast swathes of human space into an age of darkness and terror. Warp storms raged across countless systems. Communication and travel became almost impossible, and demonic incursions became commonplace. The galaxy would never be the same. In a final act of defiance, or perhaps a consequence of the sheer destructive energies unleashed, Abaddon's flagship, the Planet Killer, was destroyed in the process of Cadia's annihilation. The exact cause of its destruction is debated. Some say it was a desperate last stand by Imperial forces, others that it was consumed by the very energies it helped unleash. Regardless, Abaddon, the War Master of Chaos, managed to escape the destruction of his flagship, his ambition undimmed, his hatred of the Imperium as strong as ever. The fall of Cadia was a Pyrrhic victory for Chaos, a catastrophic loss for the Imperium, and a turning point in galactic history. The galaxy was now irrevocably changed, and the true horror of the Great Rift had only just begun to unfold. The galaxy, already reeling from the loss of Cadia, was then rent asunder by an even greater catastrophe, the Great Rift, or Cicatrix Maledictum. This colossal tear in reality, a cosmic scar stretching across the entire galactic core, was the culmination of millennia of psychic torment and demonic incursions. It was as if the very fabric of space-time had been ripped open, unleashing an unimaginable deluge of warp energy. Warp storms, previously localized phenomena, now raged with unprecedented fury, swallowing star systems whole and manifesting demonic legions across previously safe Imperial worlds. The sky itself became a canvas of madness, painted with roiling, malevolent energies that defied all natural laws. Billions of Imperial citizens, caught unprepared by this sudden cataclysm, were lost. Entire populations were either consumed by the encroaching warp, enslaved by newly emergent demonic entities, or simply vanished without a trace, their worlds plunged into eternal night and terror. Those who survived found themselves stranded, cut off from the light of the Imperium, their communications severed, their supply lines obliterated. The Astronomicon, the psychic beacon projected by the Emperor on Terra that allowed for relatively safe warp travel, was fractured by the Great Rift's emergence. Its guiding light, once a steady star in the tumultuous sea of the warp, now flickered and wavered, its intensity drastically diminished. This made interstellar travel, already a perilous undertaking, even more dangerous and unreliable. Journeys that once took weeks now stretched into months, years, or simply never concluded, as ships were lost to the warp's unpredictable currents and ravenous denizens. The psychological impact of this was immense, as humanity, accustomed to at least a semblance of order and connection, found itself adrift in a truly hostile universe. The most profound consequence of the Great Rift's appearance was the literal bisection of the galaxy. The half of the galaxy beyond the Great Rift, known as the Imperium Nihilus, was entirely cut off from Terra and the Astronomicon's fractured light. This vast expanse, home to countless Imperial worlds and untold billions of loyal citizens, was plunged into an age of unprecedented darkness and isolation. Without the Astronomicon, warp travel became a suicidal gamble, and communication between the two halves of the Imperium was all but impossible. Worlds in the Imperium Nihilus were left to fend for themselves, facing the full brunt of demonic incursions, Xanos predation, and internal strife without any hope of aid from the Segmentum Solar. It was a strategic nightmare, a logistical impossibility, and a spiritual crisis of epic proportions. The very notion of a unified Imperium seemed to shatter, replaced by two desperate halves, each fighting for survival against overwhelming odds. Yet, even in this darkest hour, seeds of hope, albeit desperate ones, had been sown. For millennia, tucked away in forgotten laboratories and hidden forge worlds, Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Call of the Adeptus Mechanicus had been toiling in secret. A figure of immense intellect and even greater eccentricity, Call had accumulated vast stores of forbidden knowledge and developed technologies that pushed the very boundaries of imperial orthodoxy. Now, with the Imperium on the brink of total collapse, he revealed his long-held secrets. Among these was the culmination of his life's work, the Primaris Space Marines, a new, enhanced breed of Astartes designed to be superior in every way to their predecessors. But, even more astonishing, Call possessed the means to resurrect a Primarch. On the Ultramarines' homeworld of Macragge, a sacred site for the Imperium, the impossible happened. Roboute Guilliman, the Lord of Ultramar, the Avenging Sun, Primarch of the Thurine Legion, was brought back from the brink of death. For 10 millennia, he had lain in stasis, grievously wounded by the demon Primarch Fulgrim during the Heresy. It was Call, with his arcane knowledge and advanced technologies, who orchestrated this resurrection. He was aided by the Inari, a faction of Eldari, the ancient Xenos race formerly known as Eldar, who sought to revive their dead god, Enead, and who believed that Guilliman's return was crucial to their own survival. The Inari's potent psychic abilities, particularly those of the Death Jester, Prince Iriel, and the Vicearch, were instrumental in stabilizing Guilliman's ravaged form and allowing Call's intricate bioengineering to take hold. The sight of a living Primarch, a demigod of the Emperor walking among mortals once more, sent shockwaves across the galaxy, inspiring awe and terror in equal measure. Guilliman, upon his full awakening, was confronted with the grim reality of the Imperium he had fought and bled for. He was horrified. The stagnation, the superstition, the rampant corruption, the sheer, unthinking dogma that had replaced innovation and progress. It was a travesty of his father's vision. The Imperium had become a decaying, ossified empire, clinging to ancient rituals and fear, rather than striving for the enlightenment and unity the Emperor had envisioned. He saw a galaxy drowning in ignorance, ruled by an oppressive bureaucracy, and beset by enemies on all sides, yet seemingly incapable of adapting or evolving. His initial interactions with the High Lords of Terra, the bureaucratic rulers of the Imperium, were marked by barely concealed disgust at their petty squabbles and adherence to tradition over pragmatism. Despite his profound disappointment, Guilliman, ever the strategist and administrator, recognized the dire necessity of his presence. He was the only one capable of uniting the disparate factions of the Imperium and leading them in this desperate hour. And so, in a move that shook the very foundations of imperial power, Roboute Guilliman was appointed Lord Commander of the Imperium by the High Lords of Terra. This ancient title, once held by the Emperor himself, granted him supreme military authority over all imperial forces. It was a desperate gamble by the High Lords, a concession of unprecedented power, but one they felt compelled to make in the face of annihilation. Guilliman, though reluctant, accepted the mantle of leadership, understanding that the alternative was the complete collapse of everything his father had built. With his authority established, Guilliman wasted no time. He initiated the Indomitus Crusade, a galaxy-spanning military campaign of unprecedented scale, designed to reclaim lost worlds, stabilize the Imperium, and push back against the myriad threats that now assailed humanity. This was not merely a military endeavor. It was an attempt to reignite hope, to bring order to chaos, and to remind the Imperium of its former glory, however tarnished it had become. The logistical challenges were immense, especially with the fractured Astronomicon and the Great Rift, but Guilliman, with his unparalleled strategic genius, began to piece together a coherent plan. Central to the Indomitus Crusade were the Primaris Space Marines. These new warriors, created by Call over millennia, were genetically engineered to be stronger, faster, and more resilient than their firstborn predecessors. They possessed additional organs, enhanced gene seed stability, and were equipped with advanced Mark X Tacticus power armor and powerful bolt rifles. Unleashed upon a galaxy that desperately needed heroes, the Primaries were deployed in vast numbers, bolstering depleted chapters and forming entirely new ones. They represented a new hope for humanity, a testament to Cowell's foresight and Guilliman's willingness to embrace progress. Their arrival was met with a mixture of awe, suspicion, and sometimes outright hostility from the older, more traditional Space Marine chapters, who viewed these new Astartes with a degree of apprehension. Guilliman himself led the Indomitus Crusade from the bridge of his flagship, the Macraga's Honor. This venerable battle barge, a relic from the Great Crusade itself, became the command center for the largest military operation in Imperial history. From its decks, Guilliman directed fleets, coordinated ground assaults, and made the strategic decisions that would determine the fate of countless worlds. He fought alongside his new Primaris warriors, inspiring them with his presence and demonstrating his tactical prowess firsthand. The Crusade was a desperate, bloody affair, a constant struggle against overwhelming odds. Every victory was hard-won, every loss a crushing blow. Thus, the Imperium entered a new, desperate era of warfare and survival. The age of the Dark Imperium, as it came to be known, was a time of constant conflict, where humanity fought for its very existence against an endless tide of enemies. Demons poured from the Great Rift, Xenos empires seized the opportunity to expand their territories, and internal strife threatened to tear the Imperium apart from within. But with a Primarch once again at its head, and a new generation of super soldiers at his command, humanity, against all odds, continued to fight. It was a fight not for glory, but for survival, a grim testament to the indomitable, if often brutal spirit of mankind in the 41st millennium. The galaxy had plunged into darkness, but a faint, flickering light of defiance led by the avenging sun still burned. The galaxy, already reeling from the catastrophic fall of Cadia and the unleashing of the 13th Black Crusade, now faced an existential threat unlike any it had encountered in millennia. As the 41st millennium drew to a close, giving way to the grim dawn of M42, a new chapter of desperation and defiance began. The Great Rift, a colossal tear in reality, had torn the Imperium asunder, and from its depths poured forth the myriad horrors of chaos. Hope, a commodity rarer than Oromite in these dark times, arrived in the most unexpected form. A Primarch, returned from the brink of death. On the hallowed world of Macraga, the spiritual heart of the Ultramarines chapter, the impossible became reality. Robute Guilliman, the Lord of Ultramar, the revered tactician and statesman, lay entombed in stasis for 10 millennia, his body grievously wounded by the demon Primarch Fulgrim. But thanks to the tireless efforts of Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Cawl, a brilliant, eccentric, and ancient artificer of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Guilliman was resurrected. This was no simple healing, but a monumental feat of bioengineering and arcane science, an act that bordered on the heretical in the eyes of many within the rigid cult of the machine god. Cawl, driven by a vision of imperial salvation and a direct, millennia-old directive from the Emperor himself, had painstakingly repaired Guilliman's ravaged form, even integrating Xenos technology, a secret he guarded fiercely, to complete the process. The Primarch, now clad in the gleaming Mark X Tacticus power armor, stood once more among the living, a beacon of hope in a galaxy plunged into despair. Guilliman's first moments of awareness were a brutal awakening. The galaxy he had known, the Imperium he had helped forge, was gone. He quickly learned of the Great Rift, a cosmic scar that cleaved the galaxy in two, now frequently referred to as the Cicatrix Maledictum. This colossal warp storm, a manifestation of untold psychic agony and demonic incursion, had created the Imperium Nihilus, a vast and isolated region of space where the Astronomicon, the Emperor's guiding psychic light, was all but extinguished. Billions of souls were lost to demonic incursions, entire star systems consumed by warp storms, and communication across the galactic divide was rendered nearly impossible. The Primarch, a master strategist and logistician, immediately grasped the terrifying implications. The Imperium was bisected, its vast military and logistical network shattered, and its very survival hanging by a thread. The sheer scale of the catastrophe was almost unfathomable, even for a being of his intellect. He saw a civilization teetering on the brink of total collapse, a myriad of threats converging from all sides. It was in this crucible of despair that Belisarius Cawl unveiled his greatest and most controversial creation, the Primaris Space Marines. For 10,000 years, Cawl had toiled in secret, guided by the Emperor's ancient command, to create a new generation of genetically enhanced warriors, superior in every conceivable way to their firstborn brethren. These Primaris Marines were taller, stronger, and possessed additional organ implants, making them more resilient and powerful. They were equipped with advanced Mark X power armor and weaponry, representing the pinnacle of Imperial military technology. Cawl presented them as the Imperium's last best hope, a necessary evolution to combat the increasingly potent threats arrayed against humanity. The revelation was met with a mix of awe and suspicion. The very notion of improving upon the Emperor's original design for the Space Marines was considered sacrilege by many within the deeply conservative Imperium. It challenged the fundamental tenets of their faith and the established order. Guilliman, ever the pragmatist, was initially wary. The idea of tampering with his father's sacred work, of creating a better Space Marine, went against his ingrained respect for tradition and the Emperor's divine will. He understood the profound implications, both theological and practical, of such a radical departure. Yet, as he surveyed the shattered Imperium, the endless tide of Xenos and demons, and the dwindling numbers of the firstborn chapters, he recognized the undeniable truth. The Imperium was dying. It needed a drastic solution, an infusion of strength that only these new warriors could provide. With a heavy heart and a profound sense of duty, Guilliman reluctantly accepted the Primaris Marines as a necessary evolution for the Imperium's survival. He saw them not as a replacement for his beloved firstborn, but as a vital reinforcement, a new shield for humanity in its darkest hour. He understood that without such a radical intervention, the Imperium would surely fall. With the Primaris Marines at his command and a renewed sense of purpose, Guilliman initiated the Indomitus Crusade. This was not merely a military campaign, but a desperate, galaxy-spanning effort to reclaim lost worlds, reconnect severed Imperial territories, and push back the encroaching darkness. Guilliman personally led this monumental endeavor, assembling the largest fleet ever witnessed in Imperial history. It was a fleet of unprecedented scale and diversity, comprising not only the newly formed Primaris chapters, but also surviving elements of firstborn chapters, regiments of the Imperial Guard, legions of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and countless auxiliary forces. The sheer logistical challenge of organizing and deploying such a force across a fractured galaxy was immense, a testament to Guilliman's unparalleled strategic genius. His presence at the head of the crusade was a powerful symbol, a rallying point for a demoralized populace and a fragmented military. As the crusade progressed, new Space Marine Primaris chapters were created and deployed across the galaxy. These new formations, often drawing recruits from worlds devastated by the Great Rift, were a vital element of Guilliman's strategy. They included the Unnumbered Suns, a vast host of Primaris Marines who had not yet been assigned to specific chapters, fighting as a unified force under Guilliman's direct command. These warriors, fresh from Cowl's creation forges, were sent to the most desperate war zones, reinforcing beleaguered Imperial forces and establishing new bastions against the darkness. The deployment of these new chapters was a monumental undertaking, requiring the establishment of new command structures, logistical chains, and training facilities. It was a rapid expansion of the Space Marine legions in all but name, a desperate gamble to stem the tide. The Indomitus Crusade was a constant, brutal struggle. The Imperium attempted to push back the forces of chaos, Xenos empires, and renegade human factions, striving to reconnect severed worlds and bring the light of the Emperor back to the Imperium Nihilus. However, they often faced overwhelming odds. The forces of chaos, emboldened by the Great Rift, were more numerous and virulent than ever before. Xenos threats, such as the Orcs and Tyranids, exploited the Imperium's weakness, launching devastating invasions. Each victory was hard-won, each advance met with ferocious resistance. Worlds thought long lost were either reclaimed at immense cost or found to be utterly corrupted, requiring extermination. The Crusade was a relentless grind, a war of attrition on a galactic scale, pushing the limits of Imperial endurance. Recognizing the strategic imperative of securing the heart of the Imperium, Guilliman established the Terran Crusade. This was a separate but equally vital component of the Indomitus Crusade, focused on reaching Terra and securing the throne world. Guilliman understood that without the Emperor's light, without a unified and secure center, the Imperium could not hope to endure. Leading a significant portion of his fleet, he battled through warp-infested space, navigating the treacherous currents of the Cicatrix Maledictum and fighting off countless demonic incursions and traitor fleets. The journey to Terra was a perilous odyssey, a testament to Guilliman's unwavering resolve and the sacrifices made by the forces under his command. It was a race against time, a desperate attempt to shore up the foundations of the Imperium before they crumbled entirely. While Guilliman was personally leading the Terran Crusade, the broader Indomitus Crusade continued its relentless expansion. One notable example of its reach was the dispatch of Fleet Quintus of the Indomitus Crusade to reinforce the Segmentum Pacificus. This vast segment of the galaxy, already reeling from Tyranid incursions and other threats, was particularly vulnerable after the Great Rift. Fleet Quintus, a formidable armada of warships and Primaris chapters, was tasked with stabilizing the region, pushing back the Xenos threats, and re-establishing Imperial control over countless systems. This deployment highlighted the sheer scale and decentralized nature of the Indomitus Crusade, with numerous fleets operating independently across the galaxy, each facing its own unique challenges and enemies. Upon his eventual arrival on Terra, Guilliman was confronted not only by the external threats to the Imperium, but also by its profound internal decay. He struggled to reform the stagnant Imperium and combat its endemic corruption. 10 millennia of stagnation, bureaucracy, and religious dogma had calcified the imperial government, rendering it inefficient and resistant to change. He encountered significant resistance from entrenched institutions, from the High Lords of Terra who clung to their power and privileges, to the various imperial adepta who viewed any deviation from ancient traditions as heresy. Guilliman, a pragmatic and logical leader, was appalled by the waste, inefficiency, and outright corruption that permeated every level of imperial administration. He found himself battling not just demons and Xenos, but also the very system he was trying to save, a system that had become its own worst enemy. His efforts to streamline bureaucracy and inject efficiency were met with suspicion and obstruction, a frustrating reality for a Primarch accustomed to swift and decisive action. Throughout the early stages of the Indomitus Crusade, the Ultramarines and their successor chapters were instrumental in many key victories. Their disciplined tactics, unwavering loyalty, and the strategic brilliance inherited from their Primarch made them a formidable force. They spearheaded countless assaults, held vital defensive lines, and served as a crucial bulwark against the tide of darkness. Their experience in large-scale warfare, combined with the influx of new Primaris recruits, made them a potent strike force, often deployed to the most critical sectors. Their homeworld of Macragge, now a central hub for the Crusade, served as a vital staging ground and logistical center, further solidifying their role in the Imperium's resurgence. In an effort to combat the pervasive institutional inertia and corruption, Guilliman issued the Lex Imperialis. This sweeping decree aimed at streamlining imperial bureaucracy and military command, attempting to cut through millennia of red tape and inefficient practices. It sought to reassert central authority, improve communication between disparate imperial factions, and ensure a more coordinated response to the galaxy-spanning threats. The Lex Imperialis was a bold attempt to bring order to chaos, to impose a semblance of the logical, efficient Imperium that Guilliman had envisioned in his past. However, implementing these reforms in a galaxy as vast and entrenched as the Imperium was a monumental task, one that would require immense political will and constant vigilance. It was a battle fought on paper as much as on the battlefield, a testament to Guilliman's understanding that the Imperium's survival depended not just on military might, but on its ability to adapt and govern effectively. The Indomitus Crusade was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to save humanity from itself and the myriad horrors that sought its destruction. Its success, or failure, would determine the fate of the galaxy. Yet, even as Guilliman's forces pushed back the darkness, new horrors emerged from the galactic periphery and the depths of ancient slumber, threatening to undo every hard-won victory. The Tyranids, the ravenous Xeno swarms from beyond the galaxy, continued their relentless advance, with Hive Fleet Leviathan, the largest and most devastating of these bioengineered horrors, resuming its consumption of worlds with renewed ferocity. Entire star systems, painstakingly reclaimed by the Imperium, would vanish from astropathic contact, their populations devoured, their biospheres stripped bare, leaving only barren husks in the wake of the alien tide. The Crusade, designed to push back chaos, found itself fighting a multi-front war against an enemy that simply consumed and moved on, leaving no ground to be held. Worlds like Cryptus, once a vital Imperial stronghold, fell to Leviathan's insatiable maw, its defenders overwhelmed by an endless tide of chitin and claw, their last desperate pleas for aid echoing unanswered into the void. The sheer scale of the Tyranid threat, a biological weapon aimed at the heart of all life, represented a challenge unlike any other, demanding resources and strategies that the already overstretched Imperium could ill afford. Simultaneously, the ancient Necron awakenings became more frequent and aggressive across the galaxy, particularly in the Segmentum Pacificus and Ultima Segmentum, regions already reeling from the Great Rift and the Tyranid incursions. These robotic pharaohs and their skeletal legions, roused from aeons of slumber, began to reclaim their star-spanning empires, viewing all other life as an infestation to be purged. Worlds thought safe for millennia suddenly found themselves under siege by tireless self-repairing machines, wielding Gauss weaponry that flayed flesh from bone and atomized matter. Dynasties like the Sautek, under the formidable leadership of Overlord Imhotep the Stormlord, began to expand their dominion, their ambition clashing violently with imperial expansion. The Crusade, already struggling with the logistics of resupplying and reinforcing its vast fleets, found itself diverting precious resources to fight an enemy that often possessed superior technology and an uncanny ability to phase in and out of reality, making conventional warfare a costly and often futile endeavor. The Necrons, with their ancient grudges and unfathomable motives, added another layer of existential dread to the Imperium's already precarious position. Further complicating matters, the insidious Genestealer cults, the harbingers and precursors to Tyranid invasions, were discovered on numerous worlds targeted by the Indomitus Crusade. These Xenos-worshipping hybrids, secretly infiltrating and subverting Imperial society from within, would rise up in bloody rebellion just as the Tyranid fleets neared, sabotaging defenses and sowing chaos to pave the way for their alien gods. The discovery of these cults, often deeply embedded in planetary governments, PDF forces, and even segments of the Adeptus Ministorum, shattered trust and fueled paranoia. Entire sectors believed loyal for centuries were found to be riddled with these Xeno sympathizers, their insidious influence spreading like a cancer. The Crusade was forced to dedicate significant resources to rooting out these internal threats, often leading to brutal purges and civil wars on worlds that were already on the brink, further weakening the Imperium's ability to resist external aggression. The psychological toll of realizing that the enemy was not just at the gates, but already within, was immense, sowing discord and fear among the populace and the Crusade forces alike. Amidst these escalating threats, Guilliman, ever the pragmatist and strategist, confronted the High Lords of Terra, clashing with their entrenched dogmatic and often self-serving policies. He found a council mired in bureaucracy, superstition, and personal ambition, largely unwilling or unable to grasp the true scale of the Imperium's peril. His attempts to implement logical, strategic reforms were met with suspicion, stonewalling, and outright resistance from individuals who prioritized their own power and archaic traditions over the survival of humanity. The Fabricator General of the Adeptus Mechanicus, for instance, resisted sharing vital STC technology, while the Ecclesiarch stubbornly clung to a literal interpretation of the Imperial Creed that often hindered practical solutions. Guilliman, a being of logic and reason, found himself increasingly frustrated by the irrationality and short-sightedness of those who held the reins of power, recognizing that their internal squabbles and adherence to outdated doctrines were as much a threat to the Imperium as any Xenos or Chaos incursion. His authority as a Primarch, while immense, was not absolute, and he often had to navigate a labyrinth of political intrigue and religious dogma to achieve even the most basic reforms, each struggle draining his resolve and highlighting the deep-seated rot within the Imperium's highest echelons. Despite these internal struggles and external pressures, the Indomitus Crusade achieved significant successes in its primary mission, to re-establish contact with many isolated Imperial worlds, bringing them back into the fold of the wider Imperium. For centuries, countless planets had been cut off by the Great Rift, their populations enduring unimaginable hardships, fighting alone against Xenos, demons, and internal strife. The arrival of the Crusade fleets, bearing the Emperor's light and the promise of aid, was often met with tears of joy and desperate relief. Worlds that had forgotten they were part of a larger empire were reintroduced to the Administratum, their defenses bolstered, their populations re-educated in the Imperial Creed, and their tithes reinstated. These reconnections were vital, not only for morale but also for rebuilding the Imperium's shattered infrastructure, re-establishing trade routes, and gathering much-needed resources and manpower. Each world brought back into the fold was a beacon of hope, a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity and the tireless efforts of the Crusade, even as the scale of the task remained daunting. However, even these victories were overshadowed by the ever-present threat of chaos. Incursions intensified across the galaxy, with Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos and arch-enemy of the Imperium, launching new Black Crusades from the Eye of Terror. These were not singular focused attacks, but rather a series of widespread, coordinated assaults, exploiting the Great Rift's instability and the Imperium's stretched defenses. Traitor legions, demon hordes, and renegade warbands poured out of the warp storms, targeting vital strategic points, Imperial strongholds, and vulnerable worlds. The 13th Black Crusade, which had culminated in the fall of Cadia and the opening of the Great Rift, was merely the prelude to a new era of galactic-wide warfare. Abaddon's tactical brilliance and sheer malevolence ensured that the Imperium could never truly rest, each victory against one chaos incursion merely pushing the demonic tide back for a moment, only for it to surge forth elsewhere with renewed fury. The presence of chaos, a constant, gnawing threat, ensured that the Indomitus Crusade was a war without end, a desperate struggle against an enemy that sought not just conquest, but the utter annihilation of all reality. As the Crusade progressed, Guilliman began to understand the true scale of the Imperium's decline and the depth of its internal rot. He saw a galaxy-spanning empire that was not merely broken, but fundamentally flawed. Its institutions ossified, its people steeped in ignorance and superstition, its leaders often more concerned with power than with duty. The technological stagnation, the pervasive dogmatism of the Adeptus Ministorum, the bureaucratic inertia of the Administratum, and the relentless infighting among various imperial factions all painted a grim picture. He witnessed firsthand the suffering of countless billions, the casual cruelty of imperial governance, and the often self-defeating policies that had brought humanity to the brink. The Imperium he had helped build 10 millennia ago, a beacon of reason and progress, had transformed into a decaying, tyrannical behemoth, held together by sheer force of will and the desperate prayers of its populace. This realization was a heavy burden, for it meant that merely defeating external enemies would not be enough. The Imperium itself needed to be fundamentally reformed, a task so monumental it often seemed impossible, even for a Primarch. The Crusade, despite its initial successes, suffered significant losses, highlighting the sheer scale of the galactic conflict and the immense cost of every victory. Fleets were shattered, entire regiments of Astra Militarum perished, and Space Marine chapters were decimated fighting on multiple fronts against overwhelming odds. The sheer attrition rate was staggering. Worlds were lost as quickly as they were reclaimed, and the logistical nightmare of maintaining such a vast military operation across a fractured galaxy stretched the Imperium's resources to their absolute limit. Each casualty, each lost ship, each fallen planet served as a stark reminder of the desperate struggle for survival. The forces of the Imperium were fighting a war of attrition on a scale unimaginable, against enemies that seemed endless, and the cost in blood and material was astronomical, threatening to bleed the Imperium dry even if it managed to hold back the tide. Guilliman's efforts to unite the Imperium were often hampered by interfactional rivalries and xenophobia. The various arms of the Imperium, from the Adeptus Astartes chapters with their ancient traditions and often conflicting agendas, to the Adeptus Mechanicus with their arcane knowledge and guarded secrets, and the Adeptus Ministorum with their fervent, uncompromising faith, often refused to cooperate effectively. Ancient grudges, doctrinal differences, and simple distrust led to squabbles and inefficiencies that cost lives and opportunities. Furthermore, the pervasive xenophobia ingrained over millennia of constant warfare against alien races made it difficult to forge even temporary alliances or understand the motives of non-human entities, even when such understanding might have been strategically beneficial. Guilliman, who had once envisioned a unified humanity, now witnessed its myriad factions pulling in different directions, each clinging to its own power and prejudices, making the task of leading them a constant uphill battle against internal resistance. As the Indomitus Crusade continued its arduous journey, the galaxy remained a war zone, with no end in sight to the conflicts. The Great Rift, the vast tear in reality, continued to expand and churn, its psychic distortions and demonic incursions a constant, unpredictable threat. The Imperium was not merely fighting a war, but a desperate existential struggle for its very survival on countless fronts. Every victory was hard-won, every loss catastrophic, and the prospect of true peace seemed an impossible dream. The scale of the war was galactic, its intensity relentless, and the forces of humanity, though vast, were constantly outmatched by the sheer number and ferocity of their enemies. Amidst this unending conflict, Guilliman faced personal doubts about his ability to save an Imperium so fundamentally broken. The weight of 10 millennia of decay, the endless war, the dogmatism, the corruption, and the sheer scale of the challenges often threatened to overwhelm even his Primarch will. He questioned whether his return was truly a boon or merely a delay of the inevitable. Could one being, even a son of the Emperor, truly mend such a fractured, dying empire? These moments of quiet despair, though never shown to his followers, were a testament to the immense psychological burden he carried, the realization that even his vast intellect and strategic genius might not be enough to turn the tide against a galaxy that seemed determined to consume itself. Thus, the Indomitus Crusade continued its arduous journey, a desperate struggle for the very survival of humanity. It was not a triumphant march, but a grim, bloody slog across a galaxy consumed by war, a testament to the Imperium's enduring, if often brutal, will to exist. The fate of humanity, poised on the knife edge of oblivion, rested on the shoulders of a resurrected Primarch and the unwavering, if often fanatical, devotion of his forces. The future remained uncertain, shrouded in the smoke of countless battles and the ever-present shadow of the Great Rift. The fires of the Cicatrix Maledictum had seared the galaxy, leaving a scar that bled reality itself. In its wake, at the dawn of M42, a new and terrifying chapter of galactic conflict began to unfold, one that would plunge the Imperium into an even deeper abyss of despair. This is the era of the Arcs of Omen, a time when Chaos Ascendant truly began to flex its newfound, horrifying might. Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos, undivided and supreme commander of the Black Legion, had long been a figure of dread. His consolidation of power, forged in the crucible of the Great Rift's eruption, was now complete. He commanded legions of traitor Astartes, countless cultists, and demon hordes, all united under his iron fist. Yet, even for Abaddon, the scale of his next ambition was unprecedented. He conceived of a grand scheme, a galaxy-spanning endeavor not merely of destruction, but of acquisition. His objective, to gather ancient relics, artifacts of immense power scattered across the stars, whose true potential remained largely untapped even by the most learned scholars of the Imperium. These were not mere trinkets of war, but pieces of a cosmic puzzle, each holding a fragment of a greater secret, a key to unlocking untold power and unraveling the very fabric of existence. To achieve this audacious goal, Abaddon knew he would require resources and knowledge beyond even his considerable grasp. Thus, he forged an unholy alliance, one that sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened Chaos Lords. His chosen partner was Vashtor the Archifane, a newly ascended demon prince. But Vashtor was no ordinary demon. He was a being of pure, malignant innovation, a demon prince of technology and artifice, born from the collective avarice and obsessive pursuit of forbidden knowledge that festered within mortal hearts. He was a master of the Forge of Souls, a nightmarish dimension within the warp where demons were bound to war machines, and technology was twisted into instruments of unspeakable cruelty. Vashtor embodied the dark apotheosis of invention, a being who could conjure impossible machines from the raw stuff of the Empyrean, fusing demon flesh with cold steel in ways that defied mortal comprehension. It was Vashtor the Archifane who offered Abaddon the means to construct the Arcs of Omen. These were not just ships, but titanic, demon-forged space hulks, each a monstrous fusion of starship wreckage, asteroid fragments, and living, screaming demon flesh. They were infused with dark technology, warp energy thrumming through their very structure, making them resilient to conventional weaponry and capable of traversing the treacherous currents of the warp with unnatural speed and precision. Each arc was a self-contained ecosystem of terror, bristling with weaponry, teeming with cultists and demons, and serving as a mobile fortress from which Abaddon's forces could launch their assaults. Vashtor's genius lay in imbuing these vessels with a singular, malevolent purpose: to hunt for ancient relics, particularly those related to the key to the Black Library. The Black Library, for those unfamiliar, is the mythical repository of all Eldar knowledge, a vast and labyrinthine citadel hidden within the Webway, the interdimensional network used by the Eldar for rapid travel. It contains secrets that could unravel the galaxy, histories of forgotten empires, and prophecies of untold futures. To gain access to such a place, to possess its knowledge, would grant Abaddon an advantage beyond measure, allowing him to truly reshape the galaxy in his image. The key to the Black Library was not a single object, but a collection of ancient Elder artifacts, each imbued with a specific function, and when brought together, they would form a device capable of unlocking the Elders' greatest secrets, tearing open the very fabric of their most sacred sanctuary. This was Abaddon's ultimate prize, and the Arks of Omen were his instruments of acquisition. The first Ark of Omen to be unleashed upon the galaxy was the Dark Vengeance. Its emergence from the warp was heralded by astronomical phenomena and widespread terror. This colossal vessel, a nightmare of twisted metal and howling demons, immediately began its campaign of terror. Its initial targets were strategically chosen, not for their resources or military value, but for their proximity to known or suspected locations of the relic fragments Abaddon sought. The Dark Vengeance was a harbinger of the chaos to come, a declaration of intent from the War Master that his ambitions had grown far beyond simple conquest. As the Dark Vengeance and subsequent Arks of Omen began their operations, the Imperium faced renewed assaults from chaos, a relentless tide of destruction that seemed to surge from every corner of the galaxy. These attacks were often coordinated with a chilling precision, targeting specific strategic objectives. Imperial supply lines were severed, vital manufacturing worlds were besieged, and communication networks were disrupted. The true genius and horror of Abaddon's strategy lay in the fact that these widespread assaults were often nothing more than elaborate feints, designed to distract from the Ark's true purpose. While Imperial forces were diverted to defend against seemingly existential threats, the Arks, under the cloak of this manufactured chaos, were quietly and methodically pursuing their true quarry. The Arks of Omen, with their immense destructive power and their ability to appear seemingly out of nowhere, began to destabilize key Imperial worlds. They would emerge from the warp, unleash their demon hordes and traitor Astartes, sow discord, and then vanish as quickly as they appeared, leaving behind a trail of devastation and confusion. This hit-and-run tactic, coupled with the sheer scale of the Arks, drew Imperial forces away from the relics Abaddon sought. Entire fleets were dispatched to hunt down these enigmatic vessels, only to find themselves chasing shadows, their resources stretched thin across a galaxy already ravaged by the Great Rift. The Imperium, already reeling from the catastrophic events of the last few centuries, found itself increasingly reactive, constantly on the defensive, struggling to keep pace with an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. From the gaping maws of the Arks, Chaos forces, including various traitor legions and cults, were deployed to raid and pillage. These were not random acts of violence, though they appeared so to the beleaguered Imperial defenders. Each raid, each act of destruction served a dual purpose: to further destabilize the Imperium and to gather intelligence or resources that might aid in the hunt for the relics. Warbands of the Black Legion, the World Eaters, the Emperor's Children, and the Death Guard, along with countless cultists and demon engines, poured forth from the Arks, their objectives meticulously planned by Abaddon's strategists and Vashtor's dark intellect. They were sent to specific systems, sometimes to retrieve ancient maps, sometimes to interrogate captured Eldar, and sometimes simply to cause enough mayhem to allow a covert team to slip in and retrieve a fragment of the key. As the Arks of Omen continued their relentless campaign, their true objective slowly became apparent to the most astute observers within the Imperium. They were not merely seeking to destroy, but to find. They began their search for the components of the key to the Black Library, a device that, as mentioned before, was capable of unlocking the Elders' greatest secrets. This realization, when it eventually filtered through the layers of Imperial bureaucracy and misinformation, sent a fresh wave of panic through the highest echelons of the Imperium. The thought of Abaddon gaining access to the Black Library, to the collective knowledge of an ancient and cunning race, was a nightmare scenario that few dared to contemplate. The implications for the future of the Imperium, already teetering on the brink, were catastrophic. The Imperium struggled to understand the true nature and purpose of these new, devastating Chaos vessels. Their unique construction, their ability to navigate the warp with such apparent ease, and their singular focus on relic hunting defied conventional Imperial strategic analysis. The Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition, usually the first to identify and categorize Xenos threats, were baffled by the demon-infused technology of the Arks. The Adeptus Mechanicus, with their rigid adherence to dogma and their fear of innovation, could not comprehend the unholy fusion of flesh and machine that characterized Vashtor's creations. This lack of understanding hampered Imperial efforts to counter the threat, leading to misdirected campaigns and wasted resources. The Arks were a new paradigm of warfare, and the Imperium was slow to adapt. Amidst this rising tide of chaos and confusion, one figure stood as a bulwark against despair: Roboute Guilliman, the Lord Commander of the Imperium and Primarch of the Ultramarines. Having been resurrected and returned to lead the Imperium, Guilliman possessed a strategic mind unparalleled in the galaxy. He quickly recognized the grave threat posed by Abaddon's new campaign. Unlike many within the Imperial hierarchy, Guilliman saw beyond the immediate destruction and understood the deeper, more insidious purpose of the Arks of Omen. He grasped the implications of Abaddon seeking the key to the Black Library and the existential danger it represented. His strategic acumen, honed over millennia of warfare and statecraft, allowed him to see the pattern in Abaddon's seemingly disparate assaults. He knew that if Abaddon succeeded in his quest, the galaxy would face a darkness unlike any it had ever known, a darkness that even the Emperor's divine light might not be able to pierce. The Arcs of Omen were not just a new weapon in Abaddon's arsenal, they were a declaration of a new kind of war, a war for ultimate knowledge and control over the very fabric of reality. And Guilliman knew with a chilling certainty that the Imperium was ill-prepared for the battles to come. Imperial forces, already stretched thin by the relentless incursions of the Great Rift, found themselves further besieged. The Adeptus Astartes, the Emperor's angelic warriors, and the vast, unyielding legions of the Imperial Guard were mobilized en masse. Their ancient fortresses and strategic star systems became staging grounds for desperate counteroffensives against the encroaching Arcs of Omen. From the verdant agri worlds of the Segmentum Pacificus, where entire planetary defense forces were annihilated in orbital bombardments, to the shattered hive cities of the Segmentum Obscurus, where close-quarters urban warfare raged for months, the galaxy became a crucible of fire and blood. Every sector, every system seemed to be touched by the shadow of these infernal vessels. These arcs, each a monstrous fusion of warship and demon engine, were not isolated incidents. They were part of a grand, terrifying symphony orchestrated by Vashtor the Archifane. His influence, previously confined to the shadowy corners of the warp and the forge worlds of the Dark Mechanicum, now blossomed into an overt, galaxy-spanning threat. He continued to innovate, deploying new, more grotesque iterations of his demon engines, each one a testament to his perverse mastery over flesh and steel, demonic essence, and mortal technology. Worlds that once boasted thriving industries were reduced to scrap heaps, their resources devoured by the ravenous maw of Vashtor's war machine. The sheer scale of his ambition, the audacious scope of his destructive creations sent shivers of dread through even the most stoic Imperial commanders. It became clear that Vashtor was not merely a servant of chaos, but a burgeoning power in his own right, a dark architect of unparalleled malevolence. The true purpose behind Vashtor's meticulously planned incursions, however, was not merely destruction for destruction's sake. His ultimate objective, aligned with Abaddon's overarching goals, was the acquisition of the key to the Black Library. This legendary artifact, or rather a collection of components that together formed a key, was rumored to unlock the deepest secrets of the Black Library, the mythical repository of all Eldari knowledge, hidden within the Webway. This quest brought the Arcs of Omen into direct and brutal conflict with the Eldari, the ancient, enigmatic Xenos race who fiercely guarded their millennia-old knowledge. Craft-world fleets, agile and deadly, engaged the hulking Arcs in spectacular void battles. Exodite world spirits, roused from their slumber, rose to defend their verdant maiden worlds. Harlequins, the enigmatic mimes of the Laughing God, danced through the chaos of battle, their blades singing against the demonic constructs. The Eldari understood the catastrophic implications of the key falling into the hands of chaos, knowing that such a prize would grant the War Master an unimaginable advantage in his war against the Imperium and all life in the galaxy. Their ancient prophecies spoke of such a threat, and they met it with a ferocity born of desperation and deep-seated fear for their already dwindling race. Amidst this maelstrom of galactic warfare and existential dread, a beacon of ancient hope flickered to life. Deep within the heart of the rock, the colossal fortress monastery of the Dark Angels, a legend stirred. Lionel Johnson, Primarch of the First Legion, the Lion of Caliban, awakened from his 10,000-year slumber. His awakening was not a gentle transition, but a jarring emergence into a galaxy utterly transformed. The whispers of the warp, the omnipresent psychic static of a dying Imperium, assailed his ancient senses. The familiar star charts were now marred by the gaping maw of the Great Rift, a cosmic wound that bled raw chaos into reality. The Imperium he had known, a nascent empire on the cusp of its golden age, was now a decaying, superstitious behemoth, clinging to survival by a thread. Disoriented, yet with the unwavering resolve that had defined him in an earlier age, the Lion began to assess the state of the Imperium and the galaxy. His initial interactions were with his own sons, the Dark Angels, who had kept vigil over his sleeping form for millennia. He learned of the heresy, of the Emperor's internment, of the long, slow decline into M42. He absorbed the grim realities of the present, the constant warfare, the pervasive influence of chaos, the fractured nature of humanity's dominion. His mind, a strategic marvel forged in the fires of the Great Crusade, rapidly processed the vast amounts of information, seeking patterns, weaknesses, and opportunities amidst the overwhelming despair. He observed the fanaticism, the technological stagnation, and the sheer, unyielding grimdarkness that had become the Imperium's defining characteristics. The galaxy was a graveyard, and humanity a desperate, dying flame. His return was a monumental event, a seismic shift in the balance of power, and an undeniable glimmer of hope amidst the encroaching darkness for the Imperium. For 10 millennia, the Imperium had yearned for the return of its primarchs, the demigod sons of the Emperor. Now, one had returned, not as a broken relic of the past, but as a formidable warrior and strategist, his mind sharp, his will unbroken. The news, though slow to spread through the fractured Imperium, ignited a spark of renewed faith in the hearts of billions. The Lion, a living legend, a symbol of the Imperium's glorious past, was once again among them. His presence alone was a rallying cry, a promise that the age of heroes was not yet over. True to his nature, the Lion L. Johnson quickly became embroiled in the ongoing conflicts. He did not hesitate, did not linger in contemplation. The galaxy was at war, and he was a warrior. Bringing his strategic genius and unparalleled martial prowess to bear, he began to turn the tide in key engagements. His tactical acumen, honed over centuries of warfare against Xenos and traitors alike, proved invaluable against the unpredictable strategies of chaos and the cunning of the Eldari. His personal combat skills, legendary even among the Primarchs, were a terrifying spectacle for friend and foe alike. He fought with a cold, precise fury, his ancient blade, the Lion Sword, carving through demon engines and traitorous Astartes with effortless grace. His presence on the battlefield galvanized Imperial forces, turning routs into determined stands, and desperate defenses into decisive victories. He was a force multiplier, a living embodiment of the Emperor's might, and his every action sent ripples of hope and fear across the galaxy. The Arcs of Omen campaign, a relentless, galaxy-spanning struggle, ultimately culminated in a direct confrontation over the final components of the key to the Black Library. The scattered elements of the key, each a potent artifact in its own right, drew the converging forces of Chaos, the Imperium, and the Eldari to a series of climactic battles. These were not mere skirmishes, but epic clashes that determined the fate of entire star systems. Vashtor, ever present, continued to unleash his most heinous creations, seeking to seize the key for his master. The Eldari, with their ancient knowledge and superior technology, fought with the desperation of a race facing extinction, knowing that the Black Library's secrets were their last hope. The Imperium, led by the newly awakened Lionel Johnson and countless heroes, fought with the grim determination of those defending their very existence. The stakes were immeasurable, the battles brutal, and the casualties astronomical. The galaxy held its breath, awaiting the outcome of this pivotal struggle. Even with the Lion's return and the fierce resistance of the Imperium and the Eldari, the galaxy continued its descent into an age of unparalleled warfare and darkness. The Arcs of Omen, though eventually countered in many sectors, had left an indelible mark. Worlds were scoured, populations decimated, and the warp's influence deepened. The widespread devastation caused by Vashtor's infernal fleet added yet another layer of suffering to an already beleaguered Imperium. The brief flicker of hope brought by the Lion's awakening was tempered by the overwhelming reality of the galaxy's plight. The forces of chaos, far from being defeated, had only grown stronger, more numerous, and more audacious in their ambitions. Abaddon's ultimate goal remained unchanged: the complete subjugation of the galaxy and the utter destruction of the Imperium. The Arcs of Omen were but one facet of his grand, millennia-spanning plan. He saw the galaxy as a ripe fruit, ready to be plucked and offered to the ruinous powers. The Imperium, in his eyes, was a rotting corpse, clinging to a false god and a dying dream. His campaigns were not about mere conquest, but about the eradication of all that the Emperor represented, and the ushering in of an age of endless, glorious chaos. Every victory, every world consumed, every soul corrupted, brought him closer to his ultimate terrifying vision. The events of the Arcs of Omen further solidified Vashtor's position as a major player in the schemes of Chaos Undivided. He had proven his worth to Abaddon, demonstrating not only his incredible ingenuity in the creation of demon engines, but also his strategic mind in orchestrating a galaxy-spanning campaign. He was no longer a mere demon prince of the Dark Mechanicum, but a force to be reckoned with, a dark genius whose influence would undoubtedly continue to shape the grim future of the 41st millennium. His ambition, fueled by a desire to transcend his demonic nature and become a true god of technology, made him a truly terrifying adversary and a potent ally for the War Master of Chaos. The galaxy, already teetering on the brink, now faced a new, insidious threat in the form of the Archifane. As the grim darkness of the 41st millennium deepened, culminating in the devastating events of the Arcs of Omen, the galaxy was poised on the precipice of an even greater catastrophe. We now arrive at the current era, the ongoing M42, a time known as the dawn of the 8th edition and beyond, a period of unprecedented change and existential threats that have irrevocably reshaped the Warhammer 40,000 universe. The galaxy, already a brutal and unforgiving place, was literally torn asunder by the Great Rift, also known as the Cicatrix Maledictum. This colossal tear in reality, a warp storm of unimaginable scale, ripped across the galactic core, plunging vast swathes of the Imperium of Man, and indeed the entire galaxy, into warp-infused darkness. Imagine a cosmic scar, miles wide and stretching for light years, where the veil between real space and the nightmare dimension of the warp has been shredded, allowing demonic entities and raw psychic energy to spill forth unchecked. This cataclysm had immediate and devastating consequences. Countless worlds, once connected by the psychic beacon of the Astronomicon, the Emperor's psychic light that guides interstellar travel, were suddenly cut off from Terra, the Imperium's homeworld. The Astronomicon itself was fractured, its light dimmed and distorted by the Great Rift's chaotic energies. This led to widespread isolation, as interstellar travel became perilous or impossible for many systems. Without the guiding light of the Astronomicon, warp jumps became blind, often leading to ships being lost in the Empyrean or emerging light years off course, sometimes into the very heart of a demon world. Fear and desperation took root on these isolated planets, leading to the rise of local warlords, who seized power in the absence of imperial authority and the proliferation of insidious cults, often worshipping the very chaos gods whose influence had birthed the Great Rift. These cults preyed on the vulnerable, promising salvation or power in exchange for loyalty to the ruinous powers, further eroding the Imperium's already fragile hold. The very fabric of imperial society began to fray at the edges, with entire sectors plunging into anarchy and despair, becoming ripe for conquest by Xenos or corruption by chaos. Yet, from this deepening despair, a flicker of hope, however dim, emerged. In a moment that defied all logic and millennia of grim reality, Robout Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, was resurrected. For 10 millennia, Guilliman had lain in stasis, grievously wounded by the demon Primarch Fulgrim during the Heresy. His miraculous return was the result of the combined and highly unlikely efforts of two vastly different individuals: Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Cawl, a brilliant but eccentric tech priest of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and the enigmatic Eldar Farseer Yvraine, a prophetess of the Eldari, who wielded the power of the newly awakened Ennead, the Eldar god of the dead. Cawl, driven by an obsessive devotion to the Imperium and a thirst for knowledge, had spent centuries meticulously repairing Guilliman's body, utilizing forbidden xenotech and arcane science. Yvraine, meanwhile, provided the final, vital spark, channeling the psychic energies of the newly emerging Eldari pantheon to fully reawaken the slumbering Primarch. The scene of his reawakening on Macragge, his homeworld, was one of awe and trepidation, a moment that sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Guilliman, a strategic genius and a paragon of reason, was appalled by the state of the Imperium he awoke to. The Imperium he had helped forge 10 millennia ago was gone, replaced by a monolithic, superstitious, and stagnant empire. He found a galaxy where scientific progress was stifled by dogma, where fear and blind faith had replaced logic and innovation, and where the Emperor, his beloved father, was worshipped as a god, a concept anathema to the secular ideals of the Great Crusade. The vision of a unified, enlightened humanity that his father had striven for had been utterly perverted. The vast, intricate bureaucracy of the Adeptus Terra, the High Lords of Terra, seemed more concerned with internal power struggles and maintaining the status quo than with the existential threats facing humanity. The sheer scale of the Imperium's decay, its spiritual and technological regression, was a profound shock to a being who remembered its golden age. Recognizing the dire need for a strong, decisive leader, and with the backing of the surviving High Lords who understood the gravity of the situation, Guilliman was appointed Lord Commander of the Imperium. This ancient title, once held by the Emperor himself, granted him supreme authority over all Imperial forces. His first and most monumental undertaking was the launch of the Indomitus Crusade. This was not merely a military campaign, but a desperate, galaxy-spanning endeavor to reclaim lost worlds, re-establish Imperial authority, and stabilize the Imperium in the face of the Great Rift's ravages. It was a monumental logistical challenge, requiring the marshalling of countless fleets, regiments of the Imperial Guard, and chapters of the Space Marines. The scale of the Indomitus Crusade was unprecedented, a last-ditch effort to pull humanity back from the brink of total collapse, a desperate gamble against overwhelming odds. To bolster the Imperium's dwindling and often overstretched forces, Belisarius Cawl unveiled his magnum opus, the Primaris Space Marines. These were not simply new recruits, but a new generation of genetically enhanced warriors, superior in every way to their firstborn predecessors. Cawl had been working on their creation in secret for millennia, following the Emperor's original genetic blueprints and improving upon them with his own unique and often controversial innovations. The Primaris Marines possessed enhanced strength, speed, resilience, and even additional organs, making them the ultimate fighting force. They were equipped with new, more powerful armor and weaponry, designed to face the increasingly deadly threats of the 42nd millennium. Their introduction was met with a mixture of awe, suspicion, and even resentment from some of the older, more traditional Space Marine chapters who viewed them as an affront to the purity of the Emperor's original design. Yet, their combat prowess was undeniable, and they quickly became a vital asset in the Indomitus Crusade, spearheading many of its most crucial offensives. The turmoil of the Great Rift also served as a catalyst for the re-emergence of new factions and ancient threats that had long slumbered or been confined to the fringes of the galaxy. Among the most significant of these were the Necrons, the soulless metallic automatons of ancient times. More Necron dynasties, long dormant in their stasis tombs, began to awaken, sensing the galactic upheaval as an opportunity. They saw the Great Rift not as a catastrophe, but as a chance to reclaim their ancient empire, the Star Empire, to finally re-establish their dominion over a galaxy they once ruled. Their tomb worlds, scattered across the galaxy, began to stir, unleashing legions of metallic warriors and terrifying war machines upon an unprepared Imperium. These awakenings were often localized at first, but as more dynasties rose, their collective threat grew exponentially, adding yet another layer of existential dread to the Imperium's woes. Further compounding the Necron threat was the unexpected return of the Necron Silent King, Sharek himself. After his long exile, a self-imposed penance for the great sin of transferring his people's souls into metallic bodies, Sharek returned to the galaxy. His motivation was not simply to reclaim his empire, but to unite his fractured people against a far greater, more insidious threat, the Tyranids. Sharik had witnessed the Tyranids' destructive power firsthand in the intergalactic void, understanding that their insatiable hunger posed an existential threat to all life, including the Necrons themselves. His return sent shockwaves through the various Necron dynasties, many of whom had long since forgotten his rule or actively resisted any attempts at unification. His presence, however, brought a new strategic dimension to the Necron threat, as he sought to forge alliances and direct his people's vast power against the Tyranid menace, even if it meant temporary uneasy truces with other galactic powers. The Imperium, already reeling from the Great Rift and the resurgence of ancient foes, struggled immensely to adapt to this new galactic landscape. It faced existential threats on all fronts, a relentless onslaught that tested its very limits. Chaos incursions, emboldened by the Great Rift, became more frequent and devastating. Demon worlds bled into real space, entire planets were consumed by warp storms, and cults of the ruinous powers flourished in the darkness. Xenos invasions, from the opportunistic orcs to the insidious Genestealer cults, intensified as these alien races exploited the Imperium's disarray. And internally, the Imperium was racked by strife, with political infighting, religious schisms, and widespread fear threatening to tear it apart from within. The vastness of the Imperium, once its greatest strength, now became a weakness, making coordinated defense and communication a near impossible task. The event that truly heralded the dawn of this new, terrifying era, the one that directly preceded and in many ways caused the Great Rift, was Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade. For 10 millennia, the War Master of Chaos had launched repeated assaults on the Imperium, each one failing to achieve his ultimate goal. But the 13th Black Crusade was different. It was a meticulously planned, galaxy-spanning campaign of unprecedented scale and ferocity, culminating in the destruction of Cadia. Cadia was a pivotal Imperial fortress world, a choke point in the Cadian Gate, the only stable passage through the Eye of Terror, the largest and most dangerous warp storm in the galaxy. Its destruction was not merely a military defeat, but a catastrophic symbolic blow to the Imperium. The planet's demise, caused by the crashing of the colossal Blackstone fortress Will of Eternity into its surface, shattered the arcane pylons that had for millennia held back the energies of the Eye of Terror. This cataclysmic event directly led to the unleashing of the Great Rift, tearing the galaxy in two and ushering in the age of the Dark Imperium. Abaddon's victory, though costly, was absolute, plunging the Imperium into an age of unprecedented darkness and chaos. And amidst all this, the Tyranid hive fleets continued their relentless consumption of biomass. These monstrous Xenos, driven by an insatiable hunger and guided by the inscrutable will of the hive mind, saw the Great Rift not as a barrier, but as a new opportunity. The psychic maelstrom of the Rift, the raw emotion and fear emanating from billions of souls, acted as a beacon, drawing new tendrils of the hive fleets from beyond the galactic rim. These new vectors of invasion, previously unseen and unknown, added a terrifying dimension to the Tyranid threat. The sheer scale of their numbers, their adaptability, and their horrifying biological weaponry made them an unstoppable force, a truly existential threat to all life in the galaxy. In particular, Hive Fleet Leviathan, already one of the largest and most devastating Tyranid incursions, posed an unprecedented threat. Its tendrils, vast fleets of bioships, struck deep into Segmentum Pacificus and Ultima, the very heartland of the Ultramarines and a vital sector of the Imperium. The sheer scale of Leviathan's advance was terrifying, consuming world after world, stripping them bare of all organic matter, leaving only barren husks in its wake. The Imperium, already stretched to its breaking point, found itself fighting a desperate, losing battle against an enemy that simply would not stop, would not negotiate, and whose only goal was total consumption. The psychic shadow of the hive mind grew ever larger, casting a pall of dread over vast swathes of the galaxy, a testament to the unending horror that M42 had brought. As the galaxy fractured, the Eldar, ever ancient and enigmatic, found themselves at a pivotal crossroads. A new faction, the Inari, emerged, driven by a desperate hope, to awaken Ennead, the slumbering Eldari god of the dead. Their quest was fraught with peril and ambition, centered on the recovery of the Kronzords, powerful artifacts said to be fragments of Ennead's nascent consciousness. Each blade held immense power and, when brought together, promised to fully awaken their deity, thereby defeating Slanesh, the chaos god who had consumed the souls of their ancestors. This pursuit inevitably led the Inari into direct conflict with nearly every other major faction. They clashed with the Imperium, who saw their rituals as dangerous Xeno sorcery, and with the forces of Chaos, who sought to corrupt or destroy the Kronzords for their own nefarious ends. Even other Eldar factions, such as the Craftworld Eldari and the Dark Eldar, found themselves at odds with the Inari, disagreeing on the methods or wisdom of their radical plan. The Inari's charismatic leader, Ivrain, the emissary of Ennead, and the enigmatic Vesark, her silent protector, became central figures in these galactic struggles, their actions often triggering unforeseen consequences that rippled across the stars. Their quest for the Kronzords, for example, brought them into contact with the Ultramarines, specifically during the Indomitus Crusade, where they briefly allied against the forces of Chaos, a testament to the desperate times. The Inari's very existence, a beacon of hope for the Eldar, also served as a constant reminder of their precarious position, teetering on the brink of extinction. Meanwhile, the forces of chaos, invigorated by the Great Rift, launched their own devastating offensives. Mortarion, the demon primarch of the Death Guard, a grotesque figure wreathed in plague and decay, set his sights on Ultramar, the heartland of the Ultramarines. His invasion was a deliberate, calculated assault, aimed not just at conquest, but at breaking the spirit of the Imperium, and, more specifically, at challenging Roboute Guilliman. The target of his most concentrated efforts was the garden world of Eax, a verdant jewel within Ultramar, known for its pristine ecosystems and its strategic importance. Mortarion sought to corrupt and transform Eax into a festering plague world, a monument to Nurgle, the chaos god of decay and disease. This invasion, known as the Plague Wars, became a brutal test of Guilliman's leadership and the resilience of the newly reformed Imperium. The Ultramarines, under the direct command of Guilliman, fought tooth and nail against the Death Guard's relentless advance, their primerous space marines facing the horrific, disease-ridden legions of Mortarion. The conflict on Eax was a microcosm of the larger galactic struggle, a desperate defense against an unyielding enemy, showcasing the grim realities of warfare in the M42 era. The planet itself became a battleground of biological warfare, its once beautiful landscape scarred by poxes and blights, a stark reminder of chaos's destructive power. From the shrouded depths of the planet of the sorcerers, Magnus the Red, the demon primarch of the Thousand Suns, continued to weave his intricate schemes. Though physically confined to his warp-infused homeworld, his psychic influence extended across vast swathes of the galaxy. Magnus, ever the master manipulator and sorcerer, sought to unravel the fabric of reality, to elevate Tzeentch, the chaos god of change and destiny, and to exact his vengeance upon the Imperium that had cast him out. His machinations were subtle, yet profound, often involving the manipulation of warp currents, the corruption of nascent psychers, and the seeding of discord within Imperial institutions. He was a puppeteer, pulling strings from afar, his Thousand Suns, legions of dust-filled power armor animated by sorcery, acting as his agents. These operatives would appear in unexpected places, gathering forbidden knowledge, performing arcane rituals, or simply sowing chaos, all in service of Magnus's grand, unfathomable designs. His presence, though often unseen, was keenly felt, a constant, unsettling force in a galaxy already teetering on the brink. The planet of the sorcerers, a realm of impossible architecture and shifting realities, served as his unholy bastion, a place where the laws of physics bent to his will, and where the future was constantly being rewritten through arcane foresight. While ancient evils resurfaced and demonic legions ravaged the stars, the younger, more expansionist factions also continued their relentless growth. The Toe Empire, a relatively young but technologically advanced xeno-civilization, found itself in a period of unprecedented expansion and challenge. The Great Rift, while a catastrophe for many, also presented new opportunities for the Toe, as it created voids in imperial control and opened up previously inaccessible regions of space. However, this expansion also brought them into contact with a wider array of hostile forces. Their encounters with the Imperium became more frequent and often more violent, as both empires vied for control of newly discovered worlds and resources. The Toe's philosophy of the greater good, their guiding principle of unity and progress, was often met with xenophobic suspicion and outright hostility by the Imperium. Furthermore, the Toe began to encounter the Necrons, ancient soulless machines of destruction, with increasing regularity. These encounters were particularly challenging for the Toe, as their energy weapons, while effective against many foes, often struggled to overcome the Necrons' self-repairing metallic bodies and advanced shielding. The Toe's rapid technological advancements were put to the test, forcing them to adapt their strategies and develop new weapon systems to counter these ancient threats. Their ongoing development of new starfaring vessels and advanced weaponry, such as the Storm Surge and Ghostkeel battlesuits, reflected their urgent need to keep pace with the increasingly dangerous galactic landscape. Beneath the surface of countless Imperial worlds, a more insidious threat festered and grew: the Genestealer cults. These grotesque hybrids, part human, part Tyranid, experienced a massive resurgence in the wake of the Great Rift. The chaos and breakdown of Imperial authority provided fertile ground for their insidious influence to spread. Operating in secret, often masquerading as legitimate religious or political movements, these cults infiltrated every level of society, from the lowest laborers to high-ranking officials. Their goal was singular: to prepare their host world for the arrival of their Tyranid masters, the ravenous Xenos hive fleets that devoured all life. The cults would sabotage defenses, corrupt communication networks, and indoctrinate populations, turning entire planets into unwitting beacons for the Tyranid invasion. The day of ascension, the moment the Hive Fleet arrived, was seen by the cultists as a glorious salvation, a cleansing fire that would usher in a new era. The proliferation of these cults was a terrifying testament to the Tyranids' evolutionary adaptability, their ability to subvert and conquer from within before launching their full, devastating assault. The sheer scale of their resurgence meant that many Imperial worlds, seemingly loyal and prosperous, were in fact rotten from the inside, waiting for the signal to rise up and betray their human masters. In response to the escalating threats, Roboute Guilliman, the Lord Commander of the Imperium, made significant strategic adjustments. The Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guard, genetically engineered and clad in golden armor, were deployed in greater numbers across the galaxy. No longer confined to the throne world of Terra, these demigods in human form served as Guilliman's personal elite shock troops, spearheading crucial offensives and securing vital strategic assets. Their presence on the front lines, a sight unseen for millennia, was a powerful symbol of the Imperium's renewed resolve. Alongside them, the Sisters of Silence, an order of anti-psychic warrior women, were also deployed in unprecedented numbers. These pariahs, immune to the warp and possessing an aura that nullified psychic powers, were invaluable in combating the rampant psychic manifestations and warp incursions that plagued the galaxy after the Great Rift. Together, the Custodes and Sisters of Silence formed the spearhead of Guilliman's military reforms, their combined might representing the pinnacle of Imperial military power, a potent counter to the overwhelming forces of Chaos and Xenos. Their deployment signaled a departure from the static defense of the past, embracing a more proactive and aggressive stance against the Imperium's myriad enemies. The most profound and terrifying consequence of the Great Rift was the creation of the Imperium Nihilus. This vast, unlit half of the galaxy, swallowed by the warp storm, became a lawless and warp-infested region where survival was a daily struggle. Cut off from the Astronomicon, the Emperor's psychic beacon that guided starships through the warp, interstellar travel became almost impossible, isolating countless worlds. Communication was severed, and many systems were left to fend for themselves against unimaginable horrors. Demon incursions were commonplace, warp storms raged unchecked, and Xenos empires previously held in check expanded into the power vacuum. The Imperium Nihilus was a realm of perpetual night, a testament to the galaxy's descent into utter chaos. For the inhabitants trapped within, every day was a fight for survival against starvation, marauding warbands, and the insidious influence of the warp. It was a region where the lines between reality and nightmare blurred, where hope was a flickering ember in an ocean of despair. The very existence of Imperium Nihilus underscored the sheer scale of the catastrophe that had befallen the galaxy, a wound that might never heal. To address these overwhelming challenges, Guilliman established the Vigilance Directive. This new strategic approach emphasized adaptability, rapid response, and a more unified command structure across the fragmented Imperium. Recognizing that the old ways of static defense and slow bureaucratic responses were no longer viable, Guilliman sought to instill a culture of proactive engagement. The Vigilance Directive aimed to identify threats early, deploy forces swiftly, and coordinate efforts across different Imperial factions, from the Space Marines to the Imperial Guard and the Adeptus Mechanicus. It was a radical departure from the entrenched traditions of the Imperium, a desperate attempt to modernize and streamline its military apparatus in the face of an existential crisis. This directive saw the deployment of new doctrines, the establishment of rapid reaction forces, and a greater emphasis on intelligence gathering and strategic planning. It was Guilliman's attempt to bring order to chaos, to give the Imperium a fighting chance in a galaxy that seemed determined to consume itself. The directive also focused on the consolidation of resources and the establishment of new supply lines to support the ongoing Indomitus Crusade, ensuring that vital war material could reach the beleaguered forces across the galaxy. The narrative of Warhammer 40,000 continued to evolve, most notably through the Psychic Awakening series. This series of campaigns and supplemental materials detailed major shifts in the galaxy's balance of power, focusing on the burgeoning psychic phenomena unleashed by the Great Rift. Each chapter of the Psychic Awakening explored different factions and their reactions to the escalating psychic energies, from the Eldar's desperate attempts to awaken Iniad, to the Imperium's struggle to control its own burgeoning psyker population, and the Chaos Force's gleeful embrace of the Warp's unleashed power. These campaigns introduced new characters, developed existing ones, and provided a dynamic, evolving storyline that directly reflected the tumultuous state of the M42 galaxy. The Psychic Awakening served as a narrative bridge, connecting the events of the Great Rift to the ongoing struggles, providing context for the new threats and opportunities that arose. It was a period of intense lore development, expanding the universe and deepening the narratives of its countless inhabitants, showcasing how the galaxy's inhabitants were forced to adapt or perish in the face of unprecedented psychic phenomena. Adding further complexity to the galactic conflict was the discovery of new xenospecies and the re-emergence of long-forgotten ones. The Great Rift, by tearing open new pathways through the warp and revealing previously unchartable regions of space, brought humanity into contact with species never before encountered. Some were benign, others terrifyingly hostile, but all added new layers of threat and mystery to the already crowded galactic stage. Simultaneously, ancient Xenos empires, long dormant or thought extinct, began to stir. Necron tomb worlds, for example, awoke in greater numbers, their silent legions rising to reclaim their ancient dominion. These new and re-emergent threats forced the Imperium and other factions to constantly reevaluate their strategies and adapt to an ever-changing threat landscape. The galaxy, already a brutal battleground, became even more unpredictable, with new enemies appearing from the shadows, each with their own unique horrors and motivations. This constant influx of new and ancient threats ensured that the galaxy remained a place of perpetual warfare, where even the most powerful empires could be blindsided by an unexpected adversary. The future of the galaxy, therefore, remains profoundly uncertain. The M42 era is a constant state of total war, with no clear end in sight for the Imperium or its countless enemies. The forces of chaos, emboldened by the Great Rift, continue their relentless assaults. Xenos empires from the Tyranids to the Orcs and the Necrons pursue their own destructive agendas. The Imperium, though revitalized by Guilliman's return, is stretched thin, fighting on countless fronts against overwhelming odds. The grim reality is that its survival hinges on constant vigilance, sacrifice, and the ability to adapt to an ever-changing and hostile galaxy. There is no grand victory on the horizon, no ultimate triumph over evil. Only the ceaseless struggle, the unending war, defines the existence of humanity, and indeed, all life in the 41st millennium. The galaxy of Warhammer 40,000 is a place of perpetual conflict, a dark and unforgiving cosmos where hope is a rare commodity, and where the only certainty is that the war will continue, forever. From the primordial stirrings of the Old Ones and the birth of the Eldar, through the cataclysmic Horus Heresy and the slow grinding decay of the Imperium, to the turbulent dawn of the 8th edition and the ever-present threat of the Great Rift, the Warhammer 40,000 timeline is a sprawling tapestry of endless war, ancient mysteries, and the grim, unwavering struggle for survival in a galaxy that knows only conflict. It is a saga defined by cycles of creation and destruction, hope and despair, all played out on a cosmic stage where the ultimate victory remains forever elusive. And that is the entire Warhammer 40k timeline, explained timeline.